Konoha village. At the edge of the Uchiha clan. The 6-year-old Uchiha, Tunan, was kneeling at the door, looking at the setting sun. His clothes were messy, covered in dust, and there were even a few footprints on his back. Uchiha Tunan was a transmigrator. It had been 3 months since he transmigrated. The soul of the original owner might have been devoured, or he might have gone to the Pure Land. The awakened cheat ability was called the legacy inheritance system. As long as the person who agreed with him died, he could inherit all the abilities of the other. There are many methods of recognition: strength recognition, emotional recognition, ideal recognition, and so on. But since he crossed over, the system prompted that only his parents had reached the standard. His parents were all members of Konoha's garrison, and they had awakened the 2 Tomo Sharingan. As for Tunan himself, under the guidance of his parents, he had already begun to learn to refine chakra. However, Tunan's talent was too poor, and at this rate, his highest achievement in his life was probably only able to reach Chunin level. If he couldn't open his Sharingan, then he would have to rely on luck. "Don't blame me, I can't help myself," Uchiha Tunan murmured, then lowered his head and made a depressed and disappointed expression, quietly waiting for his parents to return home. After a while, Tunan's parents, Yambu Uchiha and Hanako Uchiha, came back from outside. As soon as they arrived at the door, they saw the bruises on Tunan's body. Uchiha Hanako looked at him with a distressed face, but the Uchiha family had always been ruled by men, especially the education of the next generation. Uchiha Hanako could only stand there quietly and wait for Yambu to speak. Yambu frowned slightly and said coldly, "Were you bullied by your classmates?" Tunan nodded gloomily. Yambu said sternly, "Then work hard and fight back. There are no weaklings in the Uchiha clan." Then, he walked past Tunan and entered the house. Katachi wanted to reach out and pick up his son, but Uchiha Yambu's angry voice came from inside the house. "Don't worry about him." Uchiha Hanako hesitated for a moment, then retracted his arm and went to the kitchen to cook. Uchiha Tunan entered the room and poured himself a glass of sake. "That Kakashi is too skillful." Uchiha Tunan's voice came from outside the door. Uchiha Tunan paused for a moment, picked up his glass and took a small sip, and said in a gentle tone, "Kakashi? The son of Konoha's White Fang? It's normal that you can't beat him. Because of this, you should work harder to catch up to him. By the way, why are you fighting?" Uchiha Tunan stood up and nodded gloomily. Then he wiped his tears with his hand and said in a wrong tone, "Today I said that father and mother were members of the garrison, the pride of Konoha, for protecting the village. In the end, Kakashi said in front of me that you were cowards and did not dare to go to the battlefield. You only dared to hide in the village and watching civilians. The powerful Uchiha people all went to the front line, and only trash would choose to stay. I couldn't hold it in, so." "Huh." Uchiha Yambu crushed the wine glass in his hand, and his mood to drink disappeared. After taking a deep look at him, he slowly got up and walked to the bedroom. "After you eat, go to the yard to practice throwing skills." Uchiha Tunan nodded with tears on his face. After dinner, he took kunai to the yard and practiced throwing skills on the target hanging on the tree trunk. Not a single hit. In the bedroom, Uchiha Yambu and Uchiha Hanako were kneeling opposite each other, the atmosphere slightly dignified. "Have you really decided? The battlefield is very dangerous. I have always felt that Tunan is lacking in talent and lacking in ability. He has lost the face of the Uchiha clan. I didn't expect that I, as a father, would also be a waste in the eyes of others. Tomorrow, I will report to the elders and go to the front line to fight. As a father, I must set an example. I want Tunan to know that his father is not a coward, nor is he a waste. I will go with you. You can stay at home and take care of Tunan. No, as a member of the Uchiha family, he should learn to be independent." At this time, Tunan threw the kunai and looked at the house. "I'm sorry. If you don't die, it will be very difficult for me to take the first step. Isn't the will of fire particular about dedication?" Then you can sacrifice your lives for me. Although I am not your child, I will sleep with a few female ninjas with excellent genes in the future and pass down the bloodline of this body. Go down early and accompany your children. Dying in the hands of the enemy is better than dying in the hands of the clansmen in the future. It was a little bad. He had only traveled for a few months and had taken over someone else's body. He even wanted his parents to send themselves to their deaths. Why was he becoming more and more like a ninja? Then, he threw kunai in an elegant parabola and landed heavily on the ground. He missed the target. In the bedroom, Uchiha Yanbu heard the continuous sounds of kunai falling outside the room, and his determination to go to the battlefield increased. The next day, ninja school. Today was the end of the half-semester, and the students were going to take the half-semester examination. The examination time was arranged in the afternoon. In the morning, it was the time for the Hokage to preach the will of fire. All the students of the ninja school came to the playground to gather. Sarutobi stood on the platform and glanced at the students below. Then he cleared his throat and began to give a speech. After a few words, Sarutobi found that something was wrong. Most of the students below looked at him with admiration. However, there was a first-year student with deep doubt in his eyes. Sarutobi frowned and recalled what he had just said. He found that there was nothing wrong with what he had said. Perhaps it was because this child's perception was too poor and he could not understand. Then, he stopped thinking about it and continued. Halfway through, Sarutobi suddenly discovered that the doubt in the student's eyes had disappeared. Instead, it was an expression of realization. Sarutobi nodded slightly in his heart. Very good, it seemed that this kid was listening attentively. The voice of the speech became even louder. By the time he finished speaking, Uchiha Tunan had already changed his expression to one of worship, no different from the others. But Sarutobi knew that Uchiha Tunan's worship was different from the others. The others worshipped his status as a Hokage, and Uchiha Tunan was convinced by his own reasoning. Thinking of this, Sarutobi nodded his head in satisfaction. If this kid could grow up, he would be a good tool. At the end of the speech, Sarutobi left amidst the cheers of the students. Before leaving, he gave a meaningful look to Uchiha Tunan. With this glance, Uchiha Tunan immediately trembled with excitement. At noon, Uchiha Tunan returned home. As expected, the house was empty, leaving only a table of food and a note. The handwriting on the note looked a little delicate. Obviously, it was written by Uchiha Hanako. The general meaning was that the two had already set off for the battlefield, hoping that Uchiha Tunan would take care of himself. He would study hard, cultivate hard, and strive to become a powerful ninja in the future. There was enough money left in the bedroom, but he still hoped that Uchiha Tunan would not spend money lavishly. She said a lot of things to take note of. Only the last line of text revealed the tone of Uchiha Yanbu. The Uchiha clan had no cowards and no waste. After reading it, Uchiha Tunan sighed and put the note away. Have a safe journey, and never come back alive. Uchiha Tunan came to the bedroom, took out a diary from the drawer, and began to write in the diary with a pen. July 1st. Today, Sandaime Hokage came to the school to preach the will of fire. I didn't quite understand it at first. With Sandaime's explanation, I gradually understood. For this, I made the following conclusions. Oh right, today my father and mother left a note saying that they went to the battlefield. Bless them all. After writing, Tunan closed the notebook and placed it in a conspicuous position. This item will definitely be of great use in the future. I wonder if the parents of this body will die peacefully on the battlefield. I should make more plans, but I have to take a little risk. The next day, Uchiha Tunan brought his wallet to the largest bookstore in Konoha. The owner of the bookstore was an old man wearing glasses. Seeing Uchiha Tunan walk into the bookstore, he said with a warm face, "Welcome, young Uchiha, what do you need?" "Hello, I want to buy books about ninjas, the more the better." "I think you should have already gone to the ninja school. Our bookstore does not allow to sell books about ninjutsu. There are many things to pay attention to here, as well as all kinds of books like spies and assassinations, but they are not suitable for you. As long as it is about ninja books, I want them all. Uchiha Tunan's goal this time was these ninja books. The owner of the bookstore touched his chin and said with a little joy in his heart, all of them are either. Let's make it clear beforehand, you can't return them after buying them. Following the principle of not earning money for a bastard, the owner of the bookstore went against his conscience and put the books on the bookshelf into his pocket. Little guy, there are still many books here. Do you want them? It was not easy to meet a sucker. The owner of the bookstore grabbed the wool and pulled hard. Do you have any books about the Hokage? Uchiha Tunan said calmly. Yes, this book is for the Shodai Hokage, first Hokage, this book is for the Nidaime Hokage, this book is for the Sandaime Hokage. And this book, The Will of Fire signed by the Sandaime, do you want a copy? I want all of them. Not long later, Uchiha Tunan came out of the bookstore, carrying a big bag of books. Thanks for your patronage. Little guy, you will definitely become a great ninja in the future. The owner of the bookstore smiled and waved at Uchiha Tunan. Returning home, Uchiha Tunan divided the books into different categories. First, he opened the Book of the Will of Fire and placed it on the table, then placed the other books about the past Hokage deeds on his bedside. Finally, he left one of the books about ninjas and the rest in the cabinet. Flipping open the book called Uchiha Tunan began to study it seriously. In this dangerous ninja world, the first thing to learn was to save one's life. Now that he was in Konoha, it was basically not too dangerous. But it was always right to be cautious. First of all, you must choose to stand in a team. Once you stand in the wrong team, it is easy to fall asleep one day and never wake up again. Tightening his arms around Sarutobi and getting his favors was political right. He had to use all kinds of methods to express his heart and expressed his loyalty. Another point is that the ninja profession is similar to an assassin, with high offense and low defense. No matter how terrifying the damage output was, if a kunai pierced into the neck, it would immediately be cold. So, taking advantage of the time now, he had to learn more tricks. Even if he did not use them, he could guard against them. Because Uchiha Tunan was a left-behind child. From time to time, the elders in the clan would come to pay their respects. However, every time someone entered the room, they would see the book Will of Fire on the table at first glance. Most of them would scold him and then leave. Even those who were more tolerant would not be able to suppress their urges when they saw the books about the Hokage's deeds at the head of the bed. They would give Uchiha Tunan a stern warning to him. However, no matter how others tried to persuade him, his eyes were full of stubbornness. You are not allowed to say that to the Hokage-sama. Hey, Tunan, you have to know that you are from the Uchiha family. And everything is family-oriented. Compared to the other Uchiha family members, this elder had already spoken lightly. Looking at the stubborn face of the Uchiha Tunan, this elder finally couldn't help but coldly snort and leave. Seeing that the clan elder was angered away by him, Uchiha Tunan returned to his room and opened his diary, writing. I don't understand why the clan members don't understand the Will of Fire. Have they never read this book before? Perhaps the thoughts of the Sandaime were too high-end, and the hearts of the clan members were too impetuous. In fact, as long as they calmed down and seriously studied, they would find out how advanced the philosophy of the Sandaime for the village was. After studying for a few days, I summed up 3 basic points from the deeds of the previous Hokage. The achievements of the Shodai Hokage told me that I must learn to be united. The achievements of the Nidaime Hokage told me that I must learn to work hard. The achievements of the Sandaime Hokage told me that I must learn to protect. These 3 basic points are the shining points I saw in the Sandaime Hokage-sama. I decided to firm my belief, not waver, not believe in the rumors, to protect Konoha, and to follow the footsteps of the Sandaime Hokage. With the will of the Sandaime. Oh right, today mother sent a letter back and told me to take good care of myself. I will listen to it. Fortunately, the Uchiha clan would not randomly flip through other people's things. If they were to see the contents of his diary, he was afraid that a fireball would burn him into a charcoal. The Uchiha clan were all big-mouthed, especially when they encountered things that they thought were beneath them. The matter of Uchiha Tunan, after several days of fermentation, completely spread throughout the Uchiha clan. Uchiha's little devil, staying at home all day to see the sandames will of fire. Humph, useless little devil, don't you know that strength is everything? I heard that the kid stayed in the ninja school for half a year, and he was at the bottom of the exam like Obito. These two brats have insulted the glory of the Uchiha clan. I want to suggest to the elder to expel this kid from the Uchiha clan. The elder will not agree. After all, his parents are on the battlefield. When his parents come back, I will personally tell them how they taught that little brat. It has been so many years, and Hanako is the same. They are just trash, and now they have a little trash. Don't say it. If the elders hear it, they will definitely punish you. These rumors naturally spread to Sarutobi's ears through the Umbu. In the Hokage's office, after listening to the report from the Umbu about the Uchiha clan, Sarutobi breathed out a smoke ring and said, "Uchiha Tunan? So it's that child. He is very enlightened." Then he took out the exam results of the ninja school from the drawer. This child, although smart, doesn't have what it takes to be a shinobi. On the transcript, Uchiha Tunan's theoretical knowledge was ranked first, his physical skills and ninjutsu were at the bottom. Of course, the worst result was Uchiha Obito. Because Uchiha Obito's theoretical knowledge was 0, only his physical skills were better than Tunan. What a pity. Sarutobi shook his head and put the result list back in the drawer, and then no longer paid attention to Uchiha Tunan, a useless person without strength, at most a loyal civilian. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, the vacation was about to end. Uchiha Tunan had also learned many traps, assassinations, disguises, and poisoning techniques. The system had not sent any notifications, and it was clear that Uchiha Tunan's parents were still living peacefully. Two Chunin-level cannon fodder, how could their lives be so tough? Uchiha Tunan was a little distressed and could not sit still and wait for their death. The edge of the political station was clear, and the next step was to show his value. If he wanted to obtain strength, he could only obtain recognition and then kill. In a direct battle, he could not even touch his peers on the same level. The only way was to assassinate. As for the target, he couldn't be too strong or too weak. It was best if the other party didn't have any experience in assassination. Overall, he could only start with the chicks from the ninja school. If he was a first-year student, then he would have to choose from the second and third-year students. Student with strong strength and poor theory were the best target for Uchiha Tunan's assassination. Strong strength. After inheriting his ability, he would be able to stand out from his peers. If his theory was poor, it could reduce the probability of seeing through his assassination methods. The planned steps must be divided into 3 steps. Obtain recognition, carry out assassination, and deal with the aftermath. These 3 steps cannot be wrong. Obtaining recognition was the prerequisite for inheriting abilities. The assassination process could only be done by his own means. It was also more troublesome to deal with the aftermath. If the assassination unit was alarmed, it was difficult to guarantee that the assassination unit would not find out about Uchiha Tunan's tricks. Thinking of this, a cold light flashed through Uchiha Tunan. The next day, the ninja school started. This time, Sarutobi did not give another speech. It was said that the battle at the front line was in a stalemate. During the time of class, Uchiha Tunan quietly left the classroom and came to the 3rd grade classroom. Ameo-san. Uchiha Tunan waved excitedly at Uchiha Ameo, who was in the classroom. Uchiha Ameo was a 3rd-year student, ranked 6th in overall results. The first was Uchiha Tetsuo, who was also from the Uchiha clan. Uchiha Ameo saw that someone was calling him, so he turned his head and was slightly stunned. At a glance, he recognized the scum of the clan, Uchiha Tunan. He wanted to ignore him, but he couldn't stand the constant shouting of Uchiha Tunan in public. He could only stand up coolly and come to the outside of the classroom. He said coldly, "Little devil, what are you looking for me for?" I heard that Ameo-san is the #1 genius graduate. Can I train with you? Oh? Uchiha Ameo replied coldly, but the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. He was obviously in a very good mood. Then, he thought for a moment and said, that guy, Tetsuo, is the first, and my score is only 6th. Why didn't you look for him? Uchiha Tunan looked puzzled. Didn't Tetsuo-san have a good score because of his high theoretical score? You have a good eye. As a ninja, strength is the key. I am lazy to learn those theory classes. I cultivate in the martial arts arena on the north side of the clan grounds every day. If you want to come, you can come by yourself. If I have time, I can give you a few pointers. After Uchiha Ameo finished speaking, he put his hands in his pockets and walked into the classroom without looking back. Uchiha Tunan cheered and skipped towards the first-grade classroom. This act was completely like a child. In the third-grade classroom, Uchiha Ameo had just returned to his seat. Uchiha Tetsuo, who was at the side, turned his head and said to Uchiha Ameo, Ameo, stop interacting with that trash. He is the scum of the Uchiha clan. Humph, it's none of your business. Uchiha Ameo snorted coldly. Humph. Uchiha Tetsuo also snorted coldly. He turned his head to the other side. After school, Uchiha Tunan came to the martial arts arena in the north of the clan grounds. Sure enough, Uchiha Ameo was practicing the fire escape technique. Fire release technique, grand fireball technique. Boom. A blazing fireball shot out from Uchiha Ameo's mouth and smashed into the pond next to the martial arts arena. So powerful. Uchiha Tunan was stunned on the spot. Uchiha Ameo smiled. In fact, he had already noticed that Uchiha Tunan had come. The fireball technique just now was purely to show off. Little brat, you're here. Uchiha Ameo coolly turned around, his face cold and indifferent. Ameo-san is so powerful. You can actually spit out such a big fireball. Uchiha Tunan opened his hands and drew a big circle. It's just a C-class fire release. Uchiha Tianxiong was very satisfied with Uchiha Tunan's attitude. He pointed to the wooden stake next to him and said, your physical fitness is still too poor. You should train your body skills first. Okay, Ameo-san. Uchiha Tunan came to the wooden stake excitedly and started to play the wooden stake seriously. However, Uchiha Tunan's physical skills were too poor. Uchiha Ameo couldn't help but give pointers many times, but the result was still unsatisfactory. In the evening, Uchiha Tunan sat on the ground and breathed heavily. Although Uchiha Ameo was also very tired, he still maintained his cool appearance for the sake of his face. He stood in front of Uchiha Tunan with his hands in his pockets and said disdainfully, you can't do it after just training for a while. Uchiha Tunan looked disappointed and buried his head deep into his legs. He said timidly, I'm sorry to disappoint Ameo-san. I heard my clansmen talk about you before. Why do you have those foolish thoughts? Uchiha Ameo asked. Hearing this, Uchiha Tunan buried his head deeper and said with a sobbing tone, because I am a waste. My parents don't like me and my clansmen look down on me. Only the Sandaime Hokage will smile at me. I feel that the third generation really loves the village and us. So that's how it is. The soul of the weak needs to rely on the strong instinctively. Uchiha Ameo instantly understood. His tone was no longer as cold as before. He said gently, in the future, you have to prioritize the clan. Otherwise, I don't want to teach you. I'm sorry to disappoint you. Uchiha Tunan stood up and bowed deeply to Uchiha Ameo. Uchiha Ameo also heard the rejection in Uchiha Tunan's words. A trace of anger rose in his eyes. He turned around and said, get lost. I'm sorry. Uchiha Tunan apologized again, then took out a book from his pocket and handed it over. This is my gift to Ameo-san, thank you for guiding me in my cultivation. Uchiha Ameo turned around and looked at the book. He said coldly, what is this thing? Uchiha Tunan said sincerely, I read the theory courses during my vacation. This is the key point of the exam that I wrote down. I hope that Ameo-san can really become the first among the graduates. Uchiha Ameo was stunned. After all, most of the Uchiha clan members were arrogant, and they would not easily express their feelings. Most of the Uchiha clan members had never received gifts since they were young. Uchiha Ameo was no exception. Facing the key points that the little junior had painstakingly sorted out for him, his heart could not help but tremble. Grabbing the book, he proudly turned his head and said, "Humph. Remember to come early tomorrow." With that, he strode towards the clan grounds. Ding, obtained Uchiha Ameo's recognition. Hearing the system notification, Uchiha Tunan was slightly delighted. He waved at Uchiha Ameo's back and said, "Thank you, Ameo-san. I will work hard." When Uchiha Ameo returned home, he locked himself in his bedroom. Then, he could not wait to open the book that Uchiha Tunan had given him. It recorded the key points of the theory lessons taught by the ninja school in detail, and they were all summarized. Uchiha Ameo, who usually did not listen to the theory lessons, easily read it. He touched the rough book and muttered, "The quality of the paper in this book is really bad." After turning over the page, he found that the two pages were pasted together. Uchiha Ameo put his finger into his mouth, dipped it in saliva, then rubbed the page open and continued to read. On the other side, Uchiha Tunan went straight to the kitchen, opened the pot lid, and then opened the gas stove. Uchiha Tunan stared at the transparent liquid in the pot expressionlessly. As the temperature rose, it gradually evaporated. In this weather, it should take 3 days for natural evaporation. There isn't enough time. I still need someone to divert my attention. Uchiha Tunan narrowed his eyes, turned off the fire, washed the pot a few times, and then filled it with water. He turned around and opened the refrigerator, only to see that the refrigerator was full of vegetables and various weeds. Uchiha Tunan took out several types of weeds and vegetables, and then put them into the pot to cook. The food these past few days was these vegetables and weeds. It was the most stable thing to eat for the stomach. The next day, when Uchiha Ameo slept together, he felt a headache. "Do you not have enough sleep time? It seems to be the reason why you stayed up late to read last night." After some consideration, Uchiha Ameo decided to continue sleeping. It was fine to skip a day of classes. After all, the graduates did not have much new knowledge to learn. In the evening, in the training field in the north of the clan, Uchiha Ameo dragged his tired body over. Yesterday, he had promised that the little brat would teach him training in the training field today. The people of the Uchiha clan had to keep their promises. Cough cough. Uchiha Ameo sat on the grass and looked around in confusion. This kid still hasn't come. Perhaps the teacher has delayed him. On the other side, in the martial arts practice field to the northwest of the clan, Uchiha Tetsuo was desperately training. Suddenly, Uchiha Tetsuo heard movement behind him. He immediately stopped and looked back. He saw Uchiha Tunan standing there with a blank face, looking around as if he was lost. "Little brat, what are you doing here?" Uchiha Tetsuo said coldly. Uchiha Tunan seemed to be shocked by the other party's expression. He said weakly, "I'm looking for Ameo. He's not here. Get lost." Uchiha Tunan turned around and was about to leave. At the same time, he said in a low voice, "TCH." However, it was perfectly captured by Uchiha Tetsuo's ears. He immediately said with a cold face, "Brat, do you want to die?" Uchiha Tunan trembled all over and said with a trembling voice, "Why are you so fierce? You can't beat Ameo-san, so why are you looking for me to vent your anger?" Uchiha Tetsuo smiled and looked down at Uchiha Tunan. "You said that I can't beat him? Ameo has already told me that you only have high theoretical results. In terms of strength, you are no match for Ameo." "That's what he told you." "Humph." Uchiha Tunan snorted and turned to run. Behind him, Uchiha Tetsuo's face was completely gloomy. In the northern martial arts practice field, Uchiha Ameo had just done a warm-up exercise and felt weak all over. Looks like you're sick. Did you catch a cold from staying up late? Ameo-san. In the distance, Uchiha Tunan ran over as fast as he could. The corners of Uchiha Ameo's mouth curled up slightly, and then he quickly retracted his smile. He looked at Uchiha Tunan, who was panting in front of him, and said coolly, "You're late. I went to the wrong training field just now. Sorry to keep you waiting." Uchiha Tunan bowed respectfully. So. A bitter and helpless tree fell under Uchiha Ameo's feet. Who? Uchiha Ameo shouted and looked up at the tree. Ameo, I usually don't want to talk to you, but that doesn't mean you can provoke me. On a large tree with dense leaves, Uchiha Tetsuo's figure was revealed. He looked down at Uchiha Ameo with an arrogant expression. Let's fight. Let me see your recent progress. With that, Uchiha Tetsuo jumped down and attacked Uchiha Ameo with kunai in his hand. Damn it. Uchiha Ameo cursed in his heart and raised the kunai in his hand. Clang. Uchiha Ameo felt an unparalleled force coming at him, and he couldn't help but take a few steps back to stop himself. If I weren't sick, how could I let you be so arrogant? Uchiha Ameo's forehead was covered in sweat. He raised his head and glared at Uchiha Tetsuo in the distance. Shwa, shwa, shwa. A few kunai were thrown out, colliding and changing their trajectory in the air to affect Uchiha Tetsuo's judgment. Ding, 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 ding. However, this scene in front of him immediately made Uchiha Ameo stunned on the spot. He saw Uchiha Tetsuo raise the kunai in his hand to block the incoming kunai. You haven't even opened your Sharingan. In my eyes, you are also a waste. Uchiha Tetsuo lit up his single Magatama Sharingan, and a victorious smile appeared on his face. At the same time, his eyes slightly turned, looking at Uchiha Tunan, who was already stunned on the spot. Uchiha Tunan's eyes revealed worry and disbelief, as well as a trace of loss. Uchiha Ameo also noticed Uchiha Tunan's expression, and his heart immediately thumped. A wonderful feeling rose from the bottom of his heart. I am not a waste, I am not a waste, so what if you have Sharingan? I have one too. Uchiha Ameo roared angrily, straightened his body, and his eyes had already turned blood red. A round of Magatama rapidly rotated. His hands quickly formed seals. Oh? He's awakened. Uchiha Tetsuo was slightly stunned. He could tell that the other party was preparing to release the grand fireball. The corners of his mouth curled up, and his hands turned into illusions. At the same time, he began to form seals. Then let's fight it out. Fire release, grand fireball technique. X2. However, at the critical moment, Uchiha Ameo suddenly felt a sharp pain in his body. The circulation of chakra in his body suddenly stopped. Boom. A huge fireball was spat out from Uchiha Tetsuo's mouth, covering his vision. Shit. Uchiha Ameo's face was ferocious. He wanted to dodge, but he found that the pain in his heart was unbearable. It was as if he was bitten by thousands of ants. He lost consciousness. When the fireball arrived, there was the sound of a heavy object falling to the ground. Substitution? Where is he? Uchiha Tetsuo looked at the burning torch on the ground. He frowned and looked around. There was no here. There was no here either. Suddenly, Uchiha Tetsuo smelled a scent of meat and his heart skipped a beat. He killed someone. Uchiha Tunan cried out loudly and ran towards the clan grounds. Impossible. How could he die so easily? Uchiha Tetsuo said in disbelief. He was very clear about the strength of Uchiha Ameo. If they didn't use their Sharingan, the two of them would have a 50 chance of winning, not to mention that the other party had opened his Sharingan today. How could he be so weak today? Could it be that he was too strong? No, it should be that the other party had made a mistake. He didn't release the fireball, and was so stupid that he didn't know how to dodge. This was the only possibility. Uchiha Tetsuo suddenly remembered the horror of the Umbu and the severity of the clan rules, and his whole body trembled. I can't let this get out. If this gets out, I will die. Uchiha Tetsuo looked at Uchiha Tunan, who was running toward his clan, and immediately raised the kunai and rushed toward Uchiha Tunan. At this moment, Uchiha Tunan, who was running away, felt the power surging in his body, and his eyes narrowed slightly. In the next moment, Uchiha Tunan's eyes had already turned blood red, and a round of magatama was slowly rotating outside his black pupils. The power was really fascinating. How can this kid run so fast? Uchiha Tetsuo said with an ugly expression. We are almost at our clan's territory, I can't let him run away. Uchiha Tetsuo's Sharingan rotated rapidly, and while running, he made a series of hand seals. Uchiha Tunan, who was running for his life, noticed the movement of the other party, and his hands turned into afterimages, and he also began to make hand seals. When the last seal was completed, Uchiha Tunan turned around and shouted, Fire Style, Grand Fireball Technique. X2. Uchiha Tetsuo vaguely saw the single magatama in Uchiha Tunan's eyes, as well as the Grand Fireball that was about the same size as the one he released. Nanny! Boom! The two fireballs collided and completely blocked Uchiha Tetsuo's line of sight. In the next moment, several thorns pierced the flames and attacked Uchiha Tetsuo. Moreover, these kunai collided with each other in the air, changing their movement trajectory, affecting Uchiha Tetsuo's judgment. Damn it, this little brat actually knew Amayo's trick, even better than what Amayo threw. Uchiha Tetsuo had no time to dodge at all, raising the kunai in his hand to split open. However, there was a kunai that came from nowhere to see, scratching Uchiha Tetsuo's thigh. I'm injured. How is this possible? Is there really such a genius in this world? Uchiha Tetsuo endured the pain in his thigh and looked at Uchiha Tunan, who was standing on the branch in front of him with a cold expression. Uchiha Tunan looked down and said, Tetsuo-san, you didn't expect Amayo to awaken his Sharingan. You were afraid that Amayo-san would catch up with you, so you actually killed him. Do you know that Amayo-san is like a brother to me? Now that I have awakened my Sharingan, I will personally take revenge for Amayo-san. Uchiha Tetsuo also thought that he killed. In fact, the Great Elder and the others had already arrived at the scene when Uchiha Tunan released the Grand Fireball technique for the first time. The Great Elder had more or less understood what had happened from the traces of the scene and the conversation between Uchiha Tunan and Uchiha Tetsuo. However, Uchiha Tetsuo was a member of Uchiha after all, and he still needed to investigate carefully before coming to a conclusion. Thus, the Great Elder treated Uchiha Tetsuo and locked him in the ancestral hall to wait for him to interrogate him personally. The reason why Uchiha Tunan stayed behind to fight with Uchiha Tetsuo was because he guessed that his clansmen had already arrived. After all, the two of them were in the territory of Uchiha, and he had shouted so loudly in the beginning. All of this was for Uchiha Tetsuo to be convicted. In the dim ancestral hall, the Great Elder sat in his seat and looked down at Uchiha Tetsuo, who was kneeling in front of him. Then you have to admit that it was you who accidentally killed Amayo. Uchiha Tetsuo gritted his teeth and felt wronged in his heart, but the people of Uchiha clan couldn't express their grievances even if they felt wronged. He could only indignantly say, who knew that trash was so useless? He could even make a mistake when he released AC-grade ninjutsu. According to what you said, Amayo awakened his Sharingan. Do you know how precious Sharingan is to Uchiha clan? You still want to kill Tunan to silence him, don't you? Speak. Isn't that so? Yes. He is only 6 years old and has awakened his Sharingan. He is a genius of the Uchiha clan. He has more potential than you and Amayo. Uchiha Tetsuo then said with an unconvinced expression, that's because he saw Amayo die and was stimulated. Although I don't know why he has such a good relationship with Amayo. Great Elder's face was gloomy. He got up and walked out of the ancestral hall. Two geniuses with awakened Sharingan, you killed one, and you want to kill the other. Even if the first time was a mistake, the second time was when you wanted to kill your people. In a few days, everything will be clear. I will execute you in front of my people. Although Uchiha Tetsuo had admitted it, anything could happen in the world of ninjas. At this time, in the Hokage's office, an Umbu suddenly appeared in front of Sarutobi. Hokage, a murder has happened in the Uchiha clan. Well, what's going on? Sarutobi blew out a smoke ring, listening to the report of the Umbu while dealing with the documents. It seems that two students of the Uchiha clan have a conflict. One accidentally killed the other. Hearing the names of these two people, Sarutobi paused and said, Uchiha Ameo, Uchiha Tetsuo, they are both students who are about to graduate. What a pity. Then he continued to deal with the documents. Obviously, the two little geniuses were not worthy of Sarutobi's eyes, not to mention that the other party was a member of the Uchiha clan. At that time, there was another Uchiha who was present. His name was Uchiha Tunan. He was a first-year student and was suspected to have a very good relationship with the killed Uchiha. After that Uchiha was killed, this person awakened his single Magatama Sharingan and used Grand Fireball technique to fight against Uchiha Tetsuo. The two sides are equally matched. Oh? Uchiha Tunan, I didn't expect him to be a genius. Not bad, good work. After the Umbu left, Hiruzen Sarutobi put down the document and narrowed his eyes. It was unknown what he was thinking. The next day, Uchiha Tunan woke up from the bed and saw the great elder's warm smile. You're awake. Uchiha Tunan nodded and suddenly thought of something. He said excitedly, where is Ameo? A strange look flashed through the great elder's eyes. He gently patted the back of Uchiha Tunan's hand and said, don't remember what happened in the past. This old man's vision is quite accurate. I can see that you are a very generous child. Remember, the family will never harm you, nor will they use you. After saying that, the great elder stood up and walked out. When he reached the door, he said, by the way, I will execute the family law in front of my clansmen tonight and bring judgment to Tetsuo. I have already sent someone to the school to ask for a leave. You should rest well at home today. After saying that, he left without looking back. In the bedroom, Uchiha Tunan curled up with a dull face. It was unknown what he was thinking. After a while, a white pigeon landed on the windowsill and stared at Uchiha Tunan quietly. Uchiha Tunan took out the special feed from his pocket and fed it to the white pigeon. The white pigeon pecked the feed into its mouth and left with satisfaction. This white pigeon was a scouting ninja beast that Uchiha Tunan had trained according to the method in the ninja training scroll. Usually, it would help him check if someone was monitoring him. This kind of ninja beast was actually just an ordinary animal, it only needed to cast a specific illusion on it to make it recognize itself as its master and feed it often. The white pigeon was an animal that symbolized peace. He didn't like a ninja beast like Crow. It was easy for others to see that he was a bad person. An excellent hunter needed to disguise himself properly before revealing his fangs. Uchiha Tunan didn't go to the execution in public at night. Instead, he wrote a diary at home. Ameo was killed by Tetsuo. I am very sad. All of a sudden, I thought of a sentence that the third-generation master once said. Tonight, the Grand Elder will execute Tetsuo-san in front of the clansmen. I hope that Ameo-san's soul can rest in peace. Closing the diary, Uchiha Tunan went to the kitchen and stared blankly at the remaining vegetables and weeds in the refrigerator. He paused, took out all the remaining weeds, put them in the pot, and cooked them. At night, Uchiha Tunan went to the toilet more than 10 times as he wished, and he almost collapsed. The next morning, Uchiha Tunan packed up his things and went to the ninja school with a disappointed expression. When they passed by Uchiha's territory, the clansmen no longer looked at them with disdain, only kindness. Was this change brought about by my potential? When they arrived at school, Naoto Umino saw Uchiha Tunan's haggard appearance and thought that he was overly sad. He did not ask anything. Instead, when Uchiha Tunan entered the classroom, he reached out and patted his shoulder lightly. During the theory course in the morning, Uchiha Tunan lay on the table all the way, looking as if he had lost his soul. In fact, Uchiha Tunan was thinking about the plan after thinking about it. The lives of his parents were a little tough, and even the Chunin could live for so long. Now that he had the strength, he could not put all the eggs in one basket. The story of Hokage began to emerge in my mind, looking for short-lived ghosts. Suddenly, a name appeared in Uchiha Tunan's mind. Konoha's white fang, Tsukumo Hatake. Kakashi was still a freshman, but according to the plot, Kakashi should have graduated from the ninja school in a year. In other words, it had only been a few years since Tsukumo committed suicide. Perhaps he could play a big role. He would definitely die if he died, and all he had to do was gain recognition ahead of time. There were many types of recognition. First of all, he could not agree with emotion. After all, he was not related to Tsukumo. It was even harder to agree with strength. Even if his cheap parents died immediately, his own strength could not reach this standard. The only thing left was to agree with his ideals, and perhaps he could plan well. As long as he won, he could basically guarantee that he would have the strength to live for the next 20 years. During class time, Uchiha Obito ran to Uchiha Tunan's side and poked his arm. Hey, hey, hey. Uchiha Tunan raised his head. There were still deep tears on his face. Well, I heard about you from my clansmen in the morning. Don't be sad. Obito scratched his head and said in embarrassment. Uchiha Tunan nodded weakly and buried his head back into his arms. Obito smiled awkwardly and said, Don't worry, without Ameo, I, the future Hokage, will guide you in your training. Uchiha Tunan said softly, Thank you. Obito smiled and returned to his seat. Tell me what happened to Obito. Yes, why is Tunan crying like that? Is it his parents? A clansman who has a good relationship with Tunan died. He is a graduate of the ninja school, Uchiha Ameo. Under the gentle attacks of a bunch of girls, Obito disarmed on the spot. It was time for the actual combat lessons in the afternoon. Under the guidance of Naoto Umino, a group of students came to the playground to gather. Today is a one-on-one combat drill. You can choose your opponents by yourselves. Everyone has to choose. Those who get the first place in the actual combat can get the end-term bonus points. Tunan, do you need to rest? Everyone followed the gaze of Naoto Umino and focused their attention on Uchiha Tunan, who had his head lowered at the end of the crowd. Only to see Uchiha Tunan shake his head, then slowly raised his head, revealing his single Magatama Sharingan, and said with a firm face, No need, Teacher Umino, I have already pulled myself together. I will inherit Ameo-san's last wish and become an outstanding ninja. After the drastic change, he awakened his Sharingan. It seems that this child has suffered a big blow this time. But to be able to pull himself together so quickly, his mind is pretty good. A knowing smile appeared on Naoto's face as he said, Since that's the case, you will be the first to choose your opponent today. I am here. In the crowd, Obito raised his hands high. The person I want to challenge. Uchiha Tunan shifted his gaze to the crowd, ignoring Obito who recommended himself, and then fixed his eyes on. In the crowd, Kakashi, who had a lazy look on his face, slightly raised his eyebrows and reluctantly walked out. To be honest, in Kakashi's view, even if Uchiha Tunan had awakened the single Magatama Sharingan, he only had one-eye technique to actually care about. From the previous actual combat lesson, this person's actual combat experience was basically zero, and it was impossible for him to be his opponent. Everyone present, including Naoto, also thought so. Have you thought it through? You have just awakened your Sharingan. Naoto Umino asked considerately. In fact, in Naoto Umino's mind, the most suitable person to practice with Uchiha Tunan should be Uchiha Obito. After all, Uchiha Tunan's physical fitness had always been very poor, and he didn't know any ninjutsu. The single Magatama Sharingan could at most add a bit of dynamic vision to him. At least Obito's physical fitness was not bad, and the two of them should be evenly matched. Of course, according to Uchiha Tunan's potential, he might have a chance to catch up with Kakashi in the future, but obviously not now. Naoto was a little worried that Uchiha Tunan, who had just cheered up, would lose his confidence after being abused by Cassie. Teacher, don't worry. Ameo often guides me. I couldn't use it before, but now I can. Uchiha Tunan threw all the doubts that might arise in the future to the dead Uchiha Meo in advance. In the Hokage's office, Sarutobi dealt with a document and took a drag of the cigarette. Suddenly remembering something, he took out the school results list in the drawer again. Awakened the Sharingan. Sarutobi narrowed his eyes. He remembered that this afternoon's lesson was a first-year student's actual combat drill, so he put the score back in the drawer. Then he put the crystal ball in front of him and injected chakra into it. At this time, Kakashi and Uchiha Tunan walked out of the crowd and made a seal. The next second. Swish. Kakashi burst out with amazing speed, raising his fist and rushing toward Uchiha Tunan. Obviously, he intended to knock down his opponent with one punch and end this meaningless battle quickly. However, just as Kakashi's fist was about to touch, Uchiha Tunan tilted his head slightly, and at the same time, he kicked Kakashi in the stomach. Pa! Kakashi put his palms together to block Uchiha Tunan's feet and retreated a distance. There was no longer any contempt in his eyes for Uchiha Tunan. Wow! They are so fast. I didn't even see them clearly. How did Tunan block it? Is the Sharingan so powerful? Kakashi was ready for battle, and he took out a few swords from his ninja bag and threw them at Uchiha Tunan. Ding! 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 The swords in his hands collided with each other in the air, constantly changing their trajectory to affect Uchiha Tunan's judgment. He saw Uchiha Tunan holding kunai in his hand, rushing towards Kakashi, dodging these swords one by one. Kakashi's face did not change, his right hand holding kunai, his body slightly squatting down. Just when Uchiha Tunan came to Kakashi, holding kunai high to cut toward Kakashi, Kakashi did something unexpected. Ignoring Uchiha Tunan in front of him, he turned around and stabbed upwards. Clang! The two swords blocked each other. Nanny exclamations came from the crowd. They saw Uchiha Tunan appear behind Kakashi, trying to sneak attack him, but he was stopped by Kakashi. The kunai in Uchiha Tunan's hand that was rushing toward Kakashi had touched Kakashi, and the next second, it turned into a cloud of white mist. Only a piece of wood fell to the ground. When Naruto saw this scene, his eyes were filled with astonishment. He said in disbelief, while casting the clone technique, the body has already used the clone technique to replace the position. At the same time, he also used the transformation technique to turn the substitute into a kunai appearance. This was already a technique that only graduates could use, and it was also a top student among graduates. Uchiha Tunan's attack failed, and he pulled away from Kakashi. His hands immediately turned into a blur and began to make a series of hand seals. Kakashi naturally would not let Uchiha Tunan release ninjutsu. After throwing out several swords, he also made a series of hand seals. Uchiha Tunan's face did not change, and his hand seals were still the same. His Sharingan could clearly see the trajectory of the sword in his hand. Uchiha Tunan's feet did not move, and his body and head kept shaking, avoiding all the swords in his hands. Fire release, great fireball. The blazing fireball gushed out, smashing toward Kakashi. At this time, Kakashi had finished forming his hand seals, and his hand slapped the ground. Earth release, earth flow wall technique. The fireball collided with the earth flow wall, but it was unable to do anything. Uchiha Tunan's body swayed, and he pretended to have exhausted all his chakra. Then he jumped and dodged the hand that came out from the ground. Seeing that the sneak attack was not successful, Kakashi also came out from the ground. Genius, I didn't expect that Uchiha Tunan is also a genius. What a surprise. Sarutobi looked at the scene in the crystal ball, and his eyes showed a touch of joy. Then he said in a low voice. Umbu. Hokage-sama. Go investigate Uchiha Tunan. Remember not to expose yourself. Yes. On the field, Kakashi leisurely stood there and did not launch another attack. Instead, he lightly said, "Do you want to continue? The Sharingan is indeed very strong, but your chakra should be exhausted." Uchiha Tunan gasped for breath, as if he was exhausted, and smiled bitterly. He put away his kunai, put his hands on his knees, and bowed to Kakashi. I didn't expect you to be so strong. It seems that I have to work harder to catch up with you. Seeing this, Kakashi also put away his bitterness, returning to his original lazy appearance, and walked into the crowd. Although Uchiha Tunan still had some strength left, he had already shown his potential value today, and his goal had been achieved. If he really won against Kakashi, what he showed was not his potential, but strength. After all, having just awakened his Sharingan was too powerful, which was a bit too exaggerated. Being able to deal with Kakashi was the best way to be defeated. Kakashi won this match, but Tunan also performed very well. Kakashi scored A+, and Tunan scored A. You two go to the shade to rest. Naoto Umino had a smile on his face, apparently satisfied with the performance of the two. There was no need to talk about Kakashi, who was recognized as a genius in the village. As a teacher, Naoto Umino had a good impression of Uchiha Tunan, who was polite and seriously studying. Now that Uchiha Tunan showed his super talent in ninja, the more he looked at Uchiha Tunan, the more pleased he was. Half an hour later, in the office of the Hokage, the figure of the Umbu appeared in front of Hiruzen Sarutobi. Hokage-sama, I have just checked Uchiha Tunan's life experience, and I also went to his house to search. Well, is there anything unusual? There is nothing unusual about his life experience. It is the real Uchiha clan. His father is Uchiha Yanbu, and his mother is Uchiha Hanako. Both of them used to belong to the garrison of Konoha, and they volunteered to go to the front. In addition, I found a large number of ninja books bought in Uchiha Tunan's home, and they were placed in the drawer. On the bedside were books of successive Hokage deeds, and on the table in the living room, there was also a book signed by Hokage-sama, The Will of Fire. I also found Uchiha Tunan's diary. After the report, the Umbu handed Uchiha Tunan's diary to Sarutobi. Hiruzen Sarutobi took the diary and opened it. As soon as he looked at it, Hiruzen Sarutobi was immediately attracted by the words in the diary and was trapped in it, unable to extricate himself. This damned will of fire that was visible to the naked eye. He saw that these diary pages had started writing since the end of the last semester. 7th month, 1st day. Sarutobi clearly remembered that day was when he went to the ninja school to talk about the will of fire. And Uchiha Tunan's performance in the audience also attracted his attention. He did not expect that this little fellow could have so many unique insights just from listening to a speech. There were many things that he had never thought of. Moreover, from the content of the diary, his position as the Hokage was obviously higher than his parents and clansmen. In a diary, more than 90% of the content was about him. And most of the content of his parents and clansmen had only been written once. This child had just opened his Sharingan at the age of 6, and was able to exchange a short exchange of blows with Kakashi. He was already a rare genius. As long as he was nurtured a little, he would occasionally instill the will of fire. In the future, he would definitely become his confidant. It was estimated that when the child grew up, even if he asked him to personally destroy Uchiha's clan, he would not disobey the order. He was a person of his own, so he had to nurture and protect him well. Thinking of this, Hiruzen Sarutobi already regarded Uchiha Tunan as one of his own in his heart. This little fellow is someone who can inherit the will of fire. Do you think he has anything that needs help now? The members of the Umbu were all smart people. When they heard Hiruzen Sarutobi ask this, they naturally knew that Hiruzen Sarutobi was preparing to nurture Uchiha Tunan. They immediately replied, I've checked. Uchiha Tunan's parents left him a lot of money when they left. However, he seemed to have used most of the money to buy many unnecessary books. This Umbu was referring to the ninja books in the cabinet. Right now, his money should not be enough to maintain normal living expenses. Ive has opened the refrigerator in his house. There are only vegetables in the refrigerator, no meat. If this goes on, it is very likely that he will be malnourished. Lacking money. Hiruzen Sarutobi pondered. That's right, before he hadn't awakened his Sharingan, his ninjutsu and physical skills were at the bottom, so he wanted to become stronger. It was normal to buy a large amount of ninja books, but after reading those books, he found out that those books couldn't increase his strength at all. Just treat it as spending money to buy a lesson. I can also take this opportunity to close the distance between the two sides. Hiruzen Sarutobi nodded with satisfaction and handed the diary to the Umbu. Very good. It seems that you are very careful. Return the diary to that little fellow. Don't let others find out that you have been there. Yes. In the next second, the figure of the Umbu disappeared. The next day, Uchiha Tunan was in class in the classroom. Outside the classroom, a ninja teacher called out Naoto Umino, who was lecturing, and said a few words. Naoto Umino immediately returned to the classroom and said to Uchiha Tunan, "Tunan, someone is looking for you in the classroom office." Uchiha Tunan nodded, got up and left the classroom, following the ninja teacher to the classroom office. Walking in the corridor, Uchiha Tunan had already guessed who was looking for him. After all, he didn't know anyone other than his classmates and clansmen in the Konoha village. It was naturally impossible for him to be a classmate. If there was anything, he could wait until he returned home. Moreover, the system did not mention the death of his parents, and there was nothing that would make his clansmen come to the school to find him. The person who could find him was obvious. There were only Sandaime Hokage left. The person looking for you is inside. You can go in by yourself. The ninja teacher came to the door of the office and stopped, letting Uchiha Tunan go in by himself. Obviously, the status of the people inside was very high in Konoha, and could be guarded by the ninja teacher outside the door. Then the identity of the person could only be the Sandaime Hokage. Uchiha Tunan pushed open the door with a puzzled expression and looked inside. He saw Hiruzen Sarutobi sitting in front of his desk, looking at him with a kind face. The doubt in Uchiha Tunan's eyes dissipated, and the expression on his face quickly changed to surprise. He opened his mouth, but he was so excited that he could not speak. It was as if he had met his idol. He was so timid that he did not dare to step forward. He could only stand there blankly. Tunan, right? Come in quickly and close the door. Hiruzen Sarutobi was very satisfied with Uchiha Tunan's reaction. Oh. Okay. Uchiha Tunan hurriedly closed the door and ran to Sarutobi. He giggled and scratched her head. Child, don't be so formal. Although I am the Hokage, in my eyes, you are just like my child. Sarutobi stretched out his hand and gently stroked Uchiha Tunan's head. Uchiha Tunan squinted his eyes in enjoyment, as if he was receiving the touch of his family. I came to see you this time because I heard that your parents went to the front line to fight, and you stayed at home alone. It has been hard on you for this period of time. If you have any difficulties on weekdays, you can tell me. Hiruzen Sarutobi was like an old grandpa in the neighbor's house, concerned. Uchiha Tunan looked at Hiruzen Sarutobi, and immediately put on a determined expression. Hokage-sama, I don't have much to do, unlike you who work day and night for the villagers. Now that the war is so intense, you must have to deal with a lot of things every day. You are so busy, yet you still have time to care about me, Uchiha Tunan said, his voice becoming louder, and then he wiped his tears with his sleeves. Good boy, you are the future of Konoha. In the place where the leaves were flying, the fire was endless. As long as you grow up healthy, it's worth it no matter how hard I work. After saying that, Sarutobi picked up the envelope on the table and stuffed it into Uchiha Tunan's hand. I actually noticed you a long time ago. I also watched the battle between you and Kakashi. The Sharingan is indeed very powerful, but your physical fitness is indeed a bit unable to keep up. Take this money to buy some delicious food to nourish your body. Cultivation is a very exhausting thing. If you don't have enough money, you can come to the Hokage's office to find me at any time. Anyway, I don't have a place to spend my salary. It's just enough to nurture the next generation of Konoha. Hearing this, Uchiha Tunan looked at the envelope in his hand and swallowed his saliva. It was like a child thinking of something delicious. Then he shook his head and pushed the envelope back. No, Hokage-sama, you have worked so hard. You should buy more delicious food and take care of your body. If your body collapsed, Konoha would be finished. I can find something to eat myself. Sarutobi was even more satisfied with Uchiha Tunan's reply. He put the envelope back into Uchiha Tunan's hand and held it with his thick palm. Take it, child. Konoha still needs you to inherit the will of fire in the future. At this time Uchiha Tunan's face was full of tears. He looked at Sarutobi emotionally and said, "Thank you, no one has ever been so good to me. I will try my best to become an excellent ninja and raise the will of fire. Through your thoughts, Hokage-sama, I will protect Konoha with my life." Sarutobi smiled and nodded, "Very good, I am looking forward to the moment you become a ninja. This time, I want to hear your opinion on the will of fire." In this way, Uchiha Tunan and Hiruzen Sarutobi spent the entire afternoon discussing the will of fire in the teacher's office. Most of the time, Uchiha Tunan was the one talking, and Hiruzen Sarutobi was listening. In fact, Hiruzen Sarutobi did not quite understand Uchiha Tunan's opinion. However, he could hear two words from his words: loyalty. There were still about 10 minutes before school ended, and Hiruzen Sarutobi took the initiative to end the conversation. Uchiha Tunan left the classroom office with a reluctant expression. When he got home, Uchiha Tunan opened the envelope and looked at the money inside. It was more than the money his parents left him when they left. This simply allowed Uchiha Tunan to directly advance from poverty to minor health. This was the benefit of standing on the side. Uchiha Tunan casually swept the money in the envelope. His eyes did not show any signs of greed, and he placed the envelope into the drawer. Then, he went to the table, opened his diary, and began writing. Today, I was very happy. Hokage-sama personally met me in the teacher's office. He did not put on any airs, giving me the feeling of a real grandfather. That kind of meticulous care, just like his broad palm, made me feel warm. I have never known what the meaning of people living in this world is before. But today I understand, the meaning of my existence in the future is to follow the footsteps of Sandaime Hokage-sama. I have read a sentence from a ninja book. Ninjas are a tool without feelings. I am a living person, and I can't be without feelings. However, if there is a need, I am willing to become a tool in the hands of Sandaime Hokage. Today, Sandaime Hokage gave me a lot of money, and I haven't had money to buy meat for a long time. But I was a little reluctant to spend this money. After all, this money was the salary of the Sandaime Hokage, and it was his hard-earned money. I was going to save this money and wait until next February 8th, his birthday, to buy him a gift. Oh right, today I fought with Kakashi, he is really too strong. I awakened the Sharingan, but I am still not his opponent. I hope the distance between us is not too far. After writing the diary, Uchiha Tunan closed the diary. He picked a few vegetables from the fridge and cooked them in a pot. That was all for dinner tonight. The next day, Uchiha Tunan did not go straight home after school. Instead, he caught up with Kakashi, who was alone. Kakashi. Kakashi lazily turned around and looked at Uchiha Tunan. What's the matter? Can I train with you? I want to become stronger and become a ninja quickly. Please. Uchiha Tunan put his hands on his knees and bowed deeply. Kakashi hesitated for a moment, perhaps because he felt that Uchiha Tunan's strength was enough to do his own training. He nodded lightly and said, "Sure, where are we going to train?" Uchiha Tunan said with a happy face, "Let's go to your house. After all, you are training with me. I don't want you to be too far away from home for me." Kakashi nodded and continued to walk home slowly. Uchiha Tunan followed him silently. Soon, the two arrived at Kakashi's house. The wooden family was small, but the yard was big. The residential area inside was not big. After all, there were only Kakashi and Shiroi Kiba in the house. The large open space could be used for training. The two came to the open space and stood face to face, forming a seal together. The next moment, the training began. The sound of a collision of pain rang out in the open space. To the two of them, the three body techniques were already practiced to the point of perfection. They were already proficient to the point of perfection. Gradually, the two of them no longer just fought with each other, and began to use their respective ninjutsu. As expected of a genius, Kakashi had already mastered several kinds of ninjutsu. In comparison, the ninjutsu that Uchiha Tunan knew was just a big fireball. Uchiha Tunan found a suitable opportunity, and used the reason of exhaustion of chakra to surrender. As expected of Kakashi. The gap between us seems to have increased again. Uchiha Tunan looked like he was out of energy, his hands on the ground as he panted heavily. Kakashi was also panting heavily, but he clearly still had some strength left. You are much stronger than them. Uchiha Tunan staggered to his feet and bowed to Kakashi. Thank you for being willing to train with me. I wonder if I can come back again in the future. Up to you. Kakashi held his head with both hands and resumed his lazy appearance. Uchiha Tunan smiled and packed up his things. He waved at Kakashi and said, "Then that's it for today. Goodbye, Kakashi." After saying that, he left the clan under Kakashi's gaze. Unfortunately, Sakuma was not at home today. However, Uchiha Tunan was not in a hurry. A qualified hunter needed enough patience. When Uchiha Tunan returned home, he found that the fridge was already filled with meat and milk. Feeling touched, Uchiha Tunan hurriedly opened the diary and wrote in the diary. There is a lot of meat and milk in the fridge. Needless to say, I know that Sandaime Hokage-sama must have asked someone to put it in. In this world, only him would be so good to me. Oh right, today at school, I heard from Hyuga that there was an emergency at the front line. It seems that several supply lines of the battlefield were cut off by the enemy. At this moment, Sandaime Hokage must be very anxious, and I wanted to grow up quickly to help him. I remember that my father and mother are in one of the battlefields. I hope they can get through this. Time passed day by day. Perhaps because the war had reached its climax, Sakuma had not returned home. This was normal. After all, Sakuma was so strong that he must have many tasks to carry out at this time. What Uchiha Tunan needed to do was to go to the wooden house every day. Some things, as long as they were done every day, would become very normal in the eyes of others. However, Uchiha Tunan discovered one thing. That was, Kakashi's strength was getting stronger day by day. Now, even if Uchiha Tunan did not hold back, he might not be able to defeat Kakashi. In other words, Kakashi's strength was about to surpass the dead Uchiha Mayo. One must know that Uchiha Mayo was originally ranked 6th among the graduates. If one didn't look at the theoretical results, then it was estimated that his ranking would be higher. Especially at that time, Uchiha Mayo had not awakened his Sharingan. After awakening, it was estimated that he was equal to Uchiha Tetsuo. Overall, Kakashi's current strength was one of the best in the graduation class. What a terrifying genius. Uchiha Tunan let out a long sigh and took out a book from the cabinet called A Must-Have Disguise Technique for a Spy. Taking advantage of the fact that he was in the stage of growth, he could learn as much knowledge as he could. Uchiha Tunan had always been very serious when reading. Every time, he had to repeatedly chew the contents of the book and try his best to integrate them into his own knowledge system. Until late at night, Uchiha Tunan felt a little sleepy. Only then did he see 1/3 of the book. In order not to affect tomorrow's class, Uchiha Tunan turned off the light and lay on the bed to sleep. In the night sky, the lotus-like clouds scattered. The moon was like a flashing round mirror, illuminating Uchiha's clan. Uchiha Tunan had already fallen into a deep sleep. Suddenly, Uchiha Tunan opened his eyes and sat up. A powerful warm current spread from his body to his whole body. A lot of ninjutsu knowledge was directly instilled into his mind, as if it had been displayed thousands of times and turned into instinct. The eyes had already turned into Sharingan, and the Magatama inside was crazily spinning. Gradually, the rotating Magatama in the eyes of the Sharingan came to a stop, and changed from a single Magatama to a pair of Magatama. Uchiha Tunan revealed a smile on his face. He clenched his fists and felt the power of this Chunin-level Sharingan. He raised his head and looked around with his Sharingan. After looking around for half an hour and making sure that no one was watching, he muttered to himself, "Are they finally died? Then my eyes should. There should be one more Magatama." The sense of security given by the increase in strength was really fascinating. Uchiha Tunan was not satisfied with the one increase of Magatama situation. The other one should be soon. I hope I can complete the double kill tonight. Just as he was thinking, a warm current suddenly gushed out of Uchiha Tunan's body. This warm current seemed to be stronger than the previous one. This should be the power of Uchiha's divination. The speed of the Magatama in the eyes of the Sharingan was even faster. In the blood-red eyes, the afterimage of the Magatama had already formed a circle. There were 2 more ninjutsu in his mind. As for the ninjutsu instilled into his mind before, Uchiha Tunan found that he was more skilled, as if he had already used it countless times. Grand Fireball Technique, Phoenix Fire Technique, 3 Body Techniques, Phoenix Fire Claw Technique. There was also a lightning-style ninjutsu, Earthwalk. These were all the ninjutsu that Uchiha Tunan and his 2 miserable Chunin parents knew. Of course, there was still a lot of experience in his mind, as well as all kinds of skills related to traps and assassination. Soon, the Magatama in the eyes of Uchiha Tunan's Sharingan stopped spinning, and finally stopped at the 3 Magatama. Now in the clan of Uchiha, besides Uchiha Fudake, the highest level of Sharingan was the 3 Magatama. As for how to explain himself suddenly evolving into a 3 Magatama Sharingan, Uchiha Tunan had already considered this point and was not worried in the slightest. If he was a bit faster, he would be able to openly use the 3 Magatama Sharingan in front of others tomorrow. His parents were both dead and he was overly sad, causing the Sharingan to evolve. What a perfect reason. Even Uchiha Ameo, who had a good relationship with him, could make him promoted to a Magatama, let alone his dead parents. Uchiha Tunan was very satisfied with this. The only thing he was dissatisfied with was that the parents of this body were a little too useless. He didn't even know how many more ninjutsu he could learn. Now, Uchiha Tunan's strength was probably comparable to that of a Jounin. He couldn't be proud, he still needed to continue to work hard. After all, Kakashi had become a Jounin at the age of 12. A mere Jounin was nothing more than a high-level cannon fodder on the battlefield. Uchiha Tunan narrowed his eyes, and his blood-red eyes returned to black pupils. He lay down again and slept. Early in the morning, Uchiha Tunan went to the ninja school as usual. However, before he stepped into the school gate, Uchiha Tunan was pulled by Naoto Umino, and there was a cat-faced ninja standing next to him. Naoto Umino had a worried look on his face, and he said in a deep voice, "Tunan, you go to the Hokage building with the Umbu first. The Hokage has something important to tell you." Uchiha Tunan immediately said with a happy face, "Really? The Hokage-sama is going to see me again." Naoto Umino looked at the excited Uchiha Tunan, and his eyes flashed with a trace of reluctance. He forced a smile and said, "Go. Let's go, don't let the Hokage-sama wait for too long." The Umbu grabbed Uchiha Tunan's arm and used the shunjutsu to leave. After several times of using the shunjutsu, outside the Hokage's office, the figures of Uchiha Tunan and the Umbu appeared here. "Go in." The Umbu immediately used the body flicker technique and left, appearing and disappearing like a ghost. Uchiha Tunan pretended to be uncomfortable, shook his head, took a few deep breaths, and pushed the door open to enter. Seeing Sarutobi sitting in front of the desk, Uchiha Tunan's eyes immediately lit up, as if he was restraining the excitement in his heart and said, "Hokage-sama. Tunan, you are here." Sarutobi greeted Uchiha Tunan with a low mood. The worry between his brows clearly told Uchiha Tunan that something had happened. As the saying goes, when a dog meets a dog, it is either barking or licking, and when a person meets a person, it is either cheating or acting. It was obvious that Hiruzen Sarutobi was acting right now, wanting to act out the feeling of heartache. After waiting to tell the story of the death of Uchiha Tunan's parents, he took advantage of the trend to empathize with the sad Uchiha Tunan. Uchiha Tunan had used this move before he crossed over, but it was only used on women. In short, it was to take advantage of others when they were in danger. Hokage-sama, what happened? Can I help you? Uchiha Tunan walked up to Sarutobi and said with a worried face. Hiruzen Sarutobi sighed and said in a low voice, Tunan, I have something to tell you. You have to be mentally prepared. As soon as he finished speaking, Uchiha Tunan's eyes were stunned and he said in disbelief, could it be? Hiruzen Sarutobi nodded and said in a deep voice, yes, the battle report from the front. Your parents' battlefield was cut off because of the supply line. Last night, they were surrounded by the ninjas of Hidden Mist Village. Both of them have died. Impossible. Impossible. Uchiha Tunan shook his head crazily. His feet seemed to be sore and weak. He knelt on the ground and said with his hands supporting him. They are great ninjas, how can they die? Uchiha Tunan used his hand to pound the ground hard, and drops of tears fell on the floor. Hiruzen Sarutobi sighed, stood up from his seat, walked to Uchiha Tunan's side, and slowly reached out his hand, wanting to comfort him. Yuan Fizanjan's hand had only reached halfway when he suddenly stopped. He only felt that Uchiha Tunan's small body was unexpectedly emitting chakra fluctuations that could not be underestimated. Could it be? A trace of surprise flashed in the eyes of Sarutobi. Legend has it that when the emotions of Uchiha clan were violently fluctuating, it was the easiest to awaken Sharingan. And Uchiha Tunan's current situation was very consistent. If the Sharingan really evolved, then this child's potential could be comparable to Kakashi. He was only 6 years old. In order to not interrupt the possibility of the evolution of Uchiha Tunan's Sharingan, Sarutobi retracted his hand and silently watched from the side. Not long later, the ground under Uchiha Tunan was already dripping with tears, and the chakra fluctuation emitted from his body gradually stabilized. Seeing that the time was right, Sarutobi used his hand to lightly pat Uchiha Tunan's back. Yanbu and Hanako sacrificed themselves for the village. The village will always remember them. What you need to do now is to pull yourself together, inherit their wishes, and protect the village. The consolation of Sarutobi was very effective. Just as he finished speaking, Uchiha Tunan stopped crying. He wiped away the tears with his hand and slowly raised his head. What entered his eyes was the bright red Sharingan, and the 3 Magatama that surrounded his eyes spins wildly. Sarutobi looked at Uchiha Tunan's 3 Magatama Sharingan with a sympathetic expression, but in his heart he was ecstatic. This is really a good tool given to me by the heavens. Hokage-sama, please don't worry about me. Uchiha Tunan slowly stood up. He took a deep breath, then smiled at Hiruzen Sarutobi and said, I have already cheered up. I will inherit my parents' last wish and protect the village. Now that the war is busy, you must have a lot of things to deal with. If you need me, please tell me anything you need. Hiruzen Sarutobi smiled and nodded. It's good that you can think it through. When I received this news, I was very worried that you would not be able to withstand the blow. The will of fire still needs you to protect it in the future. As he spoke, he reached out and touched Uchiha Tunan's head. Uchiha Tunan looked at Hiruzen Sarutobi with a touched expression, as if he was trying his best to endure the sorrow in his heart. He said, Hokage-sama, take a good rest for the next few days. Remember not to treat yourself badly. If you need anything, you can come to the Hokage's building to find me at any time. Sarutobi said with a kind face. Uchiha Tunan nodded, turned around, and left the office. After Uchiha Tunan left, Sarutobi sat back in his seat. He took a puff of his cigarette and said with his eyes narrowed, what a good seedling. It is more suitable to inherit the will of fire than Minato. Unfortunately, it was born in Uchiha. I lost several positions. It is a little troublesome. Should I transfer the frontline army? Sarutobi said. After all, almost all the people who fought against the Mist-Hidden Village were from the Uchiha clan, and the new clan leader, Uchiha Fude, was in charge. Everyone knew that the Uchiha clan was skilled in fire and illusion techniques, and they were naturally restrained against the Mist-Hidden Village. However, after thinking for a while, Hiruzen Sarutobi gave up on the plan to change the army. Let's wait and see. According to the situation, these few local wars should be the final counterattack before death. The war should be ending soon. Suddenly, the door of the Hokage's office was pushed open, and Danzo walked into the office with a cold face. Hiruzen, I heard that a genius has appeared in the Uchiha clan, and has awakened the three Magatama Sharingan. Sarutobi frowned, took a puff of smoke, and said, Danzo, don't be reckless. Danzo said coldly, Root needs to replenish its members. When this Uchiha Tunan graduates, you should give him to me. Sarutobi shook his head and said, this child's personality is not suitable for Root. Danzo snorted coldly and said, Hiruzen, are you doubting my control? No matter what, this person came from an evil clan like Uchiha. Either kill him in the cradle in advance or firmly control him. Sarutobi still shook his head and said firmly, Danzo, I have plans to fight. You can pick Root from other ninjas. This made Danzo a bit surprised. He didn't expect that Sarutobi would actually refuse him, just because of a mere genius with three Magatama Sharingan. Danzo said with a slightly dissatisfied tone. What illusion did that little brat Uchiha cast on you? If you want to protect him like this, don't forget that he is the Uchiha clan. Pay attention to your attitude, I am the Hokage. Hiruzen Sarutobi slapped the table in anger. Danzo had a good understanding of Hiruzen Sarutobi, so he could naturally hear the determination in Hiruzen Sarutobi's tone. He also did not want to clash with Hiruzen Sarutobi because of a genius who had not yet grown up, so he turned around and walked out, leaving behind a harsh sentence. You will regret it. Geniuses only represented potential, and it was not as if they would definitely become strong in the future. Moreover, Danzo also did not lack strong people, he just lacked Sharingan. After leaving the Hokage building, Uchiha Tunan returned to Uchiha's place. However, when he got home, before he could even sit up, Uchiha's people came to inform him that he was going to the ancestral hall. Uchiha Tunan knew that the news of his awakening of the three Magatama must have reached the ears of the Great Elder and others. After all, this was a world of ninjas, and there were spies everywhere. In addition, when he first walked out of the Hokage building, he did not put away the three Magatama. It was to let others know that he had opened the three Magatama Sharingan, so as to obtain more possible recognition. Uchiha Tunan came to the ancestral hall, and saw the Great Elder kneeling at the table, extending his hand to signal. Uchiha Tunan nodded and sat down in front of the table. Great Elder spread out the scroll on the table and saw that there were many names of ninjutsu recorded on the scroll. Tunan, I didn't expect you to give me such a big surprise. You awakened three Magatama Sharingan at the age of 6. According to the clan rules, the clansman who awakened three Magatama can choose 3 ninjutsu. You can see what you want to choose. As for the rest, you need to advance to Genin, Chunin, Jounin, or to contribute to the clan before you can choose. Uchiha Tunan nodded and looked at the name of the ninjutsu on the scroll. Most of them were fire style, lightning style, and many illusions. Now, Uchiha Tunan had inherited all the abilities of his parents and Uchiha Mayo, including their experience and talent. Learning ninjutsu was naturally a piece of cake, unlike when he had just transmigrated. He was completely useless. Uchiha Tunan looked through the scroll and pointed at them one by one, just these few. The Great Elder pondered for a moment and said lightly, lightning release, lightning needle. Genjutsu, hell vision technique. Genjutsu, mirror heaven and earth transformation. It seems that you have lightning attribute innate talent, but just one illusion is enough. After all, Sharingan has the illusion of hypnosis. It's up to you. Uchiha Tunan nodded. The Great Elder left his seat. He took out 3 scrolls from the back of the ancestral hall and handed them to Uchiha Tunan. He said earnestly, your parents died unfortunately. I understand the pain in your heart. If you have anything in the future, you can tell your clansmen. Remember, we are a family. The clan will not treat you unfairly. Thank you, Great Elder. Uchiha Tunan bowed deeply and left the ancestral hall. Seeing Uchiha Tunan leave, the great elder sighed helplessly. It was obvious that Uchiha Tunan was not close to Uchiha's clan. The bow just now made the great elder feel the alienation between Uchiha Tunan and his clan. When he returned home, Uchiha Tunan first opened the Hell's Eye and Mirror World. The Hell's Eye was a very common kind of illusion, and basically all the ninjas in Konoha had learned it. This kind of illusion could make people affected by the fear in their hearts. The reason why Uchiha Tunan chose this illusion technique was because of this. It was straight to the heart. As for the mirror of heaven and earth, as long as the level of spiritual energy and illusion was higher than the other parties, it was very suitable for Uchiha Tunan, who had the Sharingan. The mirror world reversal had another effect, and that was to share vision with the target of the illusion. Uchiha Tunan intended to use this move on his own ninja beast, White Pigeon. This way, the White Pigeon's scouting effect could be improved by several levels. When the compensation money for death comes down, we can train a few dozen more ninja beasts and White Pigeons. With these two illusions, Uchiha Tunan began to create his own unique illusion based on the knowledge he learned from the Ninja Academy. Most people were already learning illusions, and the scenes in these illusions were already made. At most, it was just a slight change, but it was easy to be seen through clues. Because if he wanted to build an illusion place, he would need to consume a large amount of spiritual energy. Uchiha Tunan had inherited the spiritual energy of two of his closest relatives and one of his limbs. It was enough. Good illusions needed to be based on the ground. He first built an illusion in his mind and then affected the enemy's 5 senses, making the enemy think he was in reality. Thinking of this, Uchiha Tunan began to try to design an illusion based on the scene in his room. Several days later. Late at night, everything was silent. Uchiha Tunan sat under the eaves, maintaining a fixed rhythm. His speed was neither fast nor slow, closing his eyes and carefully feeling the flow of chakra. The last mark was completed. Uchiha Tunan stretched out his right hand and opened his 5 fingers. ZZZ-. The tip of his 5 fingers flashed with a slender arc, like a sharp needle growing out of a fingernail. The form of chakra change? Unfortunately, this lightning needle cannot be used as 1,000 copies. Uchiha Tunan muttered to himself, and then kept the tactic. There were not many seals for lightning needles. As long as his spiritual force increased a little, and then he familiarized himself with the circulation of chakra, he could release it without forming seals. This move might be a good choice to use to trick people. Thinking about it, he was talking and laughing with his prey, and then inadvertently stabbed the lightning needle into the opponent's body. Thunder-attributed chakra could also paralyze the opponent's body, so that the opponent would not feel pain at the beginning, so he would not shout at the first time. When he reacted, he would combine it with the lightning release and completely paralyze the opponent. Well, it was not bad. Presently, Uchiha Tunan had already mastered many ninjutsu. Fire style had Grand Fireball, Phoenix Fairy Fire, Phoenix Fairy Fire Claw Red. Lightning style Earth Walk and Lightning Needle. His genjutsu also had Mirror World Reincarnation and Hell's Vision technique. Of course, there was also the Hypnotic Eyes of Sharingan. The amount of chakras had reached the Jounin level, but it was unknown how much mental strength there was. In short, the strength of this body could give Uchiha Tunan a sense of security. In the past few days, Uchiha Tunan had cultivated a few more White Pigeons. Ninja beasts were a bit expensive, mainly because the special feed was rare. Uchiha Tunan was a person who lacked a sense of security, and he placed great importance on this type of scouting beast. The food used was the most expensive. Even if the White Pigeon doesn't eat much. The living expenses left by his parents were basically all used up, if not for the fact that Hiruzen Sarutobi had sent the Umbu to deliver food to him from time to time. Uchiha Tunan would have had no choice but to go into the forest to hunt wild beasts and fill his stomach. He did not know when the pension would be given out when he died. Uchiha Tunan looked up at the sky, got up, and went back to his room to rest. Just as he entered the bedroom, Uchiha Tunan was about to turn off the lights and go to sleep when he suddenly stopped, and his eyes were sparkling. "I hope he isn't here for me." After saying that, Uchiha Tunan took back his hand that was about to turn off the lights, picked up the will of fire that he had concluded, and began to read. Konoha, in the forest outside the Uchiha clan. A man with Konoha Chunin clothing pushed aside the grass in front of him and peeked out. "I hope the Uchiha clan has not arranged for that person to be in the center of the clan." Then he looked at a small courtyard on the edge of the Uchiha clan. He saw that the small courtyard house was lit with dim light, and a hazy figure was reflected on the window. "It should be that room. It's so late, yet you still don't sleep. Are all the geniuses in Konoha so desperate?" The name of this ninja in Konoha was Ishida, a spy sent by Hidden Mist Village to Konoha right after the end of the war. During the entire World War II period, Ishida only sent a few unimportant messages, and he never received any new spy missions. Recently, this local war has come to an end. Hidden Mist Village is ready to carry out an assassination before the end of the war, killing Konoha's genius. One of the superior spies went to Kakashi's house, and he was arranged to assassinate Uchiha Tunan, who was relatively less difficult. After all, Kakashi's father was Konoha's White Fang, and it was very likely that his child was secretly guarded by the Umbu. But Uchiha Tunan was different. He was a member of the Uchiha clan, and the Umbu should not come to the Uchiha clan to monitor him. Most of the guardian ninjas in the Uchiha clan had put their energy into the central area of the clan. From time to time, the howls of wild beasts could be heard in the forest, making one feel terrified. However, for a Chunin like Ishida, the howling of wild beasts made him feel a little more at ease. Ishida carefully observed for a while and confirmed that there was no one nearby. Only then did he put down his guard. He rushed out from the grass, turned into a black shadow, and lurked toward Uchiha Tunan's house. However, what he did not expect was that his every move had already fallen into the eyes of the white pigeon resting on a branch behind him. He saw that the white pigeon was quietly standing on the branch, using the dense leaves to cover its body. Only a cold and deep Sharingan was revealed. Perseverance, resolutely carry out the will of fire with the Sandaime Hokage as the center. Following his footsteps, Ishida crouched on the roof, listening to the passionate reading sounds coming from the room. He couldn't help but laugh in his heart. Another poor bookworm brainwashed by the will of fire. Without further ado, Ishida slowly pulled out his short blade, jumped down from the roof, and gently landed. The whole movement was smooth and without any movement. With a sneer on his face, he came to the door and pushed it open. This place was far away from the center of Uchiha's territory. Even if there was a sound in a short period of time, those ninjas would not be able to arrive in time. And in the eyes of Ishida, Uchiha Tunan was just a student who had just entered the ninja school. So what if he had awakened the 3 Magatama Sharingan? It was just that he only had potential. He was not even a genin. He could not rely on the 3 techniques to kill him. At this moment, Ishida could already imagine the frightened expression on Uchiha Tunan's face when he was pierced by the knife, the moment the door was pushed open. The lights in the bedroom suddenly went out, and the whole room fell into darkness. The sound of reading stopped abruptly. This guy was indeed a genius. His alertness was quite high. But in the face of absolute strength, he was still dead. Ishida held the long knife in his hand tightly and walked into the dark room step by step. Ishida's ears moved and he recognized that this was the sound of water dripping from the kitchen faucet. He felt a little annoyed in his heart, but the task was important, so he didn't care about the details. In the darkness, Ishida could vaguely see the layout of the room. His eyes were fixed on the bedroom door, and he walked over step by step. He slowly reached out and put his hand on the door. "Kid, say goodbye to this world." A cruel smile appeared on Ishida's face, and then he suddenly pulled the door open. His right hand had already raised his long knife and was ready to strike at Uchiha Tunan, who was stubbornly resisting. However, no one. Ishida was slightly shocked. He stood at the door of the bedroom, neither retreating nor retreating. He began to think about where Uchiha Tunan would hide. In his eyes, the layout of the bedroom was very simple. There was basically no place to hide people except for the cabinet. If it were me, I would hide by the door. I would use the blind spot to cover myself and launch a surprise attack when the enemy comes in. However, this kid is still a student after all. If he is a little timid, he should hide in the cabinet. Ishida thought, took a breath, and calmed down to listen. After many years of being a ninja, he was used to being cautious, because if Uchiha Tunan hid by the door, he might be ambushed if he entered rashly. Even if the chance of success was low. What he needed to do now was to listen to the other person's breathing to determine the other person's position and kill him in one blow. Other than the sound of dripping water, there was no sound of breathing. As expected of a genius, seeing through my intentions. But it was useless to see through it. You can't keep holding your breath, can you? Then I'll wait for the time when you can't hold it in. There was a trace of ridicule in the eyes of Ishida, as if he was laughing at Uchiha Tunan's stupid response method. Time passed by bit. As if he had transformed into a top hunter in the darkness, Wellspring quietly waited for his prey to give themselves away. Who? At this moment, a suppressed breathing sound came from the cabinet. The moment the sound appeared, Ishida turned into a black shadow and stabbed towards the wardrobe. Pooh! The short blade pierced straight through the wardrobe, but he did not hear the muffled sound he imagined. What was going on? There was a trace of doubt in the eyes of Ishida. The other party was clearly in the cabinet, and there was no muffled groan. It could be said that the other party had strong willpower and could endure pain. But the feeling of the short blade piercing was obviously wrong. The next moment, the entire room suddenly lit up, and a gentle voice sounded from behind Ishida. Hello there, visitor. Do you want to drink a cup of tea before you go on your way? Ishida suddenly turned around and saw Uchiha Tunan wearing a white shirt and gold-rimmed glasses, sitting at the table in the living room watching him. On the table were 2 cups of fragrant tea. Looking at the white smoke rising from the tea, it was obvious that it had just been brewed. Ishida's eyes were filled with uncertainty. Suddenly, he heard the sound of water dripping. Out of the corner of his eye, he glanced at the faucet in the kitchen. The faucet was not dripping water. Ishida raised his eyebrows and made a seal on the spot. He said fiercely, "Smelly brat, you still dare to use this kind of low-level genjutsu in front of me? Go to hell and practice more." Chakra, who was inside his body, began to quickly circulate. Illusion, break. The next moment, the illusion was removed, and the scenery in front of Ishida changed. He found that he had already opened the cabinet and pushed the door. The short blade in his hand was placed in front of Uchiha Tunan's neck, and the 3 Magatama Sharingan, which was covered with blood, trembled all over. Illusion rebound, poor guy. Ishida smiled cruelly. He was originally angry that he had been hit by the other party's illusion, but seeing Uchiha Tunan's appearance of backlash, his heart instead felt a little carefree. What a genius, actually able to make him fall into illusion. However, this illusion technique was still a little too immature. In the next moment, the short blade stabbed forward and pierced through Uchiha Tunan's neck, causing blood to spray everywhere. Ishida drew the short blade and prepared to leave this place quickly. The moment he turned around, lights lit up and the same scene began to play out. Hello there, visitor. Do you want to drink a cup of tea before you go on your way? How is that possible? I have clearly removed your illusion. Ishida subconsciously took 2 steps back. Ishida glanced at the kitchen faucet out of the corner of his eye and saw that there was no water in the faucet at all. Damn brat. He could actually resist the backlash from the illusion and cast the illusion on me again. It should have been activated the moment I was about to kill him. The will to seek survival is quite strong. However, all of this was meaningless. In an instant, Ishida understood everything. The frightened expression on his face immediately disappeared, and he made another hand seal. Illusion, break. The whole room fell into darkness again. Before he could breathe a sigh of relief, the lights lit up again, but the person sitting in the living room was no longer Uchiha Tunan. Instead, it was a jounin of the Uchiha clan. This was the captain of the Konoha garrison, Uchiha Wamani, that he had seen before. He saw that Uchiha Wamani was looking at Ishida with a smile that was not a smile. The three magatama in his eyes moved, giving him a great pressure. You can actually break my illusion, not bad. As a genius in Konoha, how could Uchiha Tunan not be protected? Tell me, who are you? As Uchiha Wamani spoke, he stood up and looked at Ishida with a proud gaze. It was as if he didn't even put Ishida in his eyes. There was cold sweat on Ishida's forehead, and his right leg trembled uncontrollably. How was that possible? No wonder all of this was so strange. Was it because I was hit by an illusion the moment I entered the door? It should be. After all, it was the illusion personally cast by Uchiha clan's jounin. It was already lucky that I was able to undo it in the end. No, what if this was also an illusion? With a trace of luck, Ishida quickly looked at the faucet in the kitchen, only to see that the water was dripping. This was not an illusion. Ishida tightened the short blade in his hand, his eyes wandering, looking for an opportunity to escape. Uchiha's jounin gently raised his hand, and then suddenly put it down. He raised his eyebrows slightly and said, "Oh? It seems that I don't have to do it myself. Someone is looking for you." Ishida was stunned when he heard this, and he thought of a possibility in his heart. It's over. Could it be the Umbu? Suddenly, a few ninjas wearing cat masks appeared next to Ishida and said in a cold voice, "Ishida, a spy from the Mist Village. Your companion tried to assassinate Kakashi but was killed by the Umbu. Do you want to be killed on the spot or cooperate with us to the interrogation room of Konoha?" Failed. As expected. There was a trace of sadness in Ishida's eyes. The appearance of these cat masks was a trait that only the selected ninja could use, the Umbu. He was just a chunin, but he was surrounded by several high ninja as Ishida could no longer bear the pressure, his hands drooping weakly, and the short blade in his hand fell to the ground with a clang. In the next moment, his vision went dark. What was going on? Why did he turn off the lights? Pucci. A kunai pierced through the heart of Ishida, blood splashing. Ishida powerlessly fell to the ground, his eyes full of confusion. As life passed, Ishida's vision gradually blurred, and in the darkness, he vaguely saw a pair of dense three Magatama Sharingan. Pucci. 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 After a few strikes, Uchiha Tunan confirmed that the person was completely dead and turned on the light. The reason why Uchiha Tunan's illusion technique was so strong was mainly because he had inherited the innate talent of three people. His mental strength increased sharply, and in a short period of time, he constructed the room environment. It wasn't that Ishida couldn't undo the illusion technique, but every time when Ishida accelerated his circulation of chakra, before the illusion was removed, Uchiha Tunan would give the other party the illusion that the illusion was removed. The sound of dripping water was just a psychological hint, and the tap didn't drip water from beginning to end. Moreover, at the final moment of the illusion technique, he used the Hell's Eye technique to dig out the thing that the other party was most afraid of at the moment. The thing that this person was most afraid of was that someone was guarding Uchiha Tunan and his companions had failed. The Umbu came to arrest him. When Ishida finally saw the tap dripping with water, he completely thought that he was in reality. Uchiha Tunan returned to the bedroom, took out the only seal scroll from the bedroom, and put the body into the scroll. Then he went to the kitchen to turn on the faucet, wet the rag, and clean up the blood on the ground. He also wiped his hands with soap to get rid of the smell of blood. He took off his clothes and put them into the washing machine, changing into a clean white shirt. It was fine to destroy the corpses, but he was a person who Sarutobi Hiruzen took interest in, so as long as he did not do anything too excessive in this village, he did not have to be afraid. What's more, this was a spy from the enemy village, and killing him would give him merit points. Relying on his three Magatama Sharingan to use illusion to kill a chunin alone was not a small feat. There was nothing to hide. Of course, he could not hide it. This person also had a companion. When the interrogation department searched his memory, everything would come out. After thinking about it, he took the scroll and walked to the Hokage building. Uchiha Tunan, who was wearing a white shirt and gold-rimmed glasses, walked on the quiet street with a scroll in hand. He had only taken 2 steps when an umbu appeared in front of him. "It seems that you are fine. There are spies in the enemy village. The situation is urgent. Please follow me to the Hokage building." Umbu said a few words, and his eyes subconsciously glanced at the scroll in Uchiha Tunan's hand. He had a rough guess in his heart. To be able to kill the middle ninja at such a young age, what a genius. It was obvious that this umbu also knew the position of Uchiha Tunan in the heart of the Sarutobi Hiruzen. Now that he had guessed the strength of Uchiha Tunan, he tried to speak as gently as possible. Uchiha Tunan nodded and said with a serious face, "I have something to discuss with the Hokage. Sorry to trouble you." After saying that, he bowed very politely. With Uchiha Tunan's outfit, he looked very polite, which made people feel good about him. The umbu nodded, came to Uchiha Tunan's side, reached out and grabbed his shoulder, and used the body flicker technique to leave. In the Hokage's office, Sarutobi frowned, smoked a cigarette, and anxiously walked back and forth. From time to time, he would look at the crystal ball. He saw that the crystal ball showed Uchiha Tunan's house. Originally, Sarutobi was resting at home, but suddenly the umbu came to report that there was an enemy village spy who sneaked into the Hatake family to assassinate Kakashi. As a result, the enemy village spy did not expect that this evening, Sakumo returned to Konoha. As soon as the enemy village spy stepped into the Hatake clan's property, he was cut off by Sakumo. Then he was sent to the interrogation room by the umbu, using various methods to interrogate the information. The assassination target of the other spy was Uchiha Tunan, who was also known by the umbu. One of the umbu immediately went to Uchiha Tunan's house, while the other went to the territory of the Sarutobi clan to report to Sarutobi Hiruzen. Sarutobi came to the office of the Hokage and immediately used the crystal ball to observe the situation of Uchiha Tunan's house. However, the crystal ball observed the things in the village from the perspective of Konoha's enchantment, and could not see the situation inside the house. This was also why Sarutobi Hiruzen could only look at the open air every time he had free time. In fact, before Sarutobi came to the office, Uchiha Tunan had already left Uchiha's home and was walking on the road. "Hokage-sama, Uchiha Tunan is here." Just as Sarutobi was anxious, the voice of umbu came from outside the door. "Quick, come in." Squeak, the door of the office was pushed open. Uchiha Tunan ran in excitedly and looked at Sarutobi with burning eyes. His eyes were full of reverence and closeness. Sarutobi looked up and down at Uchiha Tunan, but he did not see any injuries on his body. He breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Child, are you all right?" Such an excellent and loyal tool, fortunately it was fine, otherwise it would have been a great loss. When Uchiha Tunan heard this, his eyes showed a visible touch of emotion, revealing a smile and said, "Sandaime Hokage-sama, you do not have to worry about me. That spy has already been killed by me. Such a small matter should not weigh your mind. I am very sorry." After saying that, Uchiha Tunan bowed deeply and handed the scroll to Sarutobi. Sarutobi took the scroll and was even more satisfied with Uchiha Tunan. He had only awakened 3 Magatama not long ago, but he was able to kill the Chunin in a surprise attack. This talent was really great. A perfect tool. "How did you kill this hidden mist ninja?" Sarutobi asked casually as he placed the scroll on his desk. "I used Genjutsu to confuse him," Uchiha Tunan explained concisely. Sarutobi nodded. The illusion of the 3 Magatama Sharingan was indeed powerful. It seemed that Uchiha Tunan's illusion skill was also very high. Otherwise, he would not have been able to use illusion skill to restrain a Chunin not long after awakening the 3 Magatama. Then he called an assassin and handed the scroll to him. Then he returned to his seat and motioned for Uchiha Tunan to sit opposite him. "Since you are fine, then stay here for a while. The umbu still needs to check if there are any fish that have slipped through the net. I am very worried about your safety." Sarutobi said with a face full of concern. But, sir, it is already so late. If you don't go back to rest, how can you have the energy to deal with work tomorrow? Uchiha Tunan said hesitantly. How can I have the energy to deal with work tomorrow? Sarutobi smiled and waved his hand. Hehe, it doesn't matter to me. You can just lie on my desk and rest. You still have classes tomorrow. However, Uchiha Tunan shook his head with a determined look. No, I have rested very well in the first half of the night. You should rest for a while. You. Sarutobi looked at the serious face of Uchiha Tunan and nodded kindly. Well, I will rest for a while. You can come with me. Yes. Only then did Uchiha Tunan nod his head in agreement. The two of them sat in front of the desk, and Uchiha Tunan just stared straight at Sarutobi. Seeing Sarutobi also felt a little uncomfortable. He awkwardly said, "Go to sleep." Then, he became a role model and lied down on the table to take a nap. After a while, Uchiha Tunan slowly got up and walked to the shelf at the side. He picked up the imperial divine robe of Sarutobi and gently draped it over Sarutobi. Then, he returned to his seat, his face resolute as he prepared for an impossible attack. This little fellow was really not bad. In his previous life, Uchiha Tunan had already practiced these skills to the point of perfection. After about 2 hours, Sarutobi pretended to have just woken up. Coincidentally, the Umbu also arrived at this time. Reporting to the Hokage-sama, this is the information from the interrogation room. After that, he handed the scroll to Sarutobi. It seemed that he had to be more cautious when doing anything in the future. Uchiha Tunan thought in his heart, but he kept a respectful expression on his face as he looked at Sarutobi. Sarutobi opened the scroll and looked at it. After confirming that there were no other spies in the village, he ordered, "Send Tunan back to have a good rest and guard him in secret for a while." Yes. Hearing this, Uchiha Tunan stood up and bowed to Sarutobi. Then I will go first. Hokage-sama, you should also go back and rest. Okay, I will go back to rest immediately. Sarutobi smiled and said goodbye to Uchiha Tunan. After Uchiha Tunan left, Sarutobi retracted the smile on his face and went to the window to look far away. The spies have all been abandoned? It seems that this local war is really going to end. It was already 42 years in Konoha. It had been 5 years since the Second Ninja War. However, since 1 year ago, when the hidden cloud village sneaked into Konoha and kidnapped Kushina, the other villages began to make small movements again. The buffer small countries between the several big countries erupted in many local wars. In particular, the Hidden Mist village that implemented the Bloody Mist policy, the entire village was like crazy, constantly harassing the Wave country, which was the border between the Fire country and the Water country. However, after fighting for several years, the Mist-hidden village should stop for a while. Otherwise, if they continued to fight like this, they would get angry, and another ninja world war would not be far away. The next day, Uchiha Tunan came to the ninja school wearing a white shirt and gold-rimmed glasses. Although he was assassinated yesterday, he also got a very useful information. Sakumo came back. In other words, the next main target that he needed to attack appeared. Sakumo committed suicide in the 4th year of Konoha, which meant that there was still more than a year left. As long as he could get Sakumo's approval in advance, after he died, Uchiha Tunan was completely confident that he could survive the dangerous Third Ninja World War. A Kage-level expert, how many Chunin parents would have to sacrifice to achieve this? As soon as he entered the classroom, Uchiha Tunan's outfit attracted the eyes of the female students. There was a burst of love-struck screams in the classroom. It had to be said that the genes of Uchiha's family were not bad, and their appearance was almost no weaker than that of other people. Except for Obito. The reason why there hadn't been such a big reaction in the past was that the dress was too ordinary, and the bulge could not show Uchiha Tunan's temperament. In fact, according to Uchiha Tunan's character, he did not want to be so high-profile. But there was no other way, the character setting had to be established like this. An ordinary person suddenly obtained great power, and he had to change it. Just like the people of Uchiha, many people were innocent and cute when they were young, but when they had some strength, they became very arrogant. Uchiha Tunan naturally could not use this kind of character as a role model. After all, a person who was deeply brainwashed by the Sandaime Hokage must be different from other people, and it was best to go against them. He was gentle and refined, elegant, low profile, and easygoing. Their personalities were all based on their appearance, speech, and actions. However, their appearance must be the most important. Their first impression of them would make others label them for them. "Good morning, everyone." Uchiha Tunan greeted the girls with a humble face. Then, he returned to his seat with a calm expression and casually undid the buttons on his collar. Gulp. There was a sound of swallowing in the classroom. Are the children in this world so precocious? Uchiha Tunan thought in his heart, but he did not raise his eyes at all, treating the people around him as air. He flipped through the textbook and previewed it. His eyes revealed concentration and seriousness. This behavior made Uchiha Tunan's charm rise several levels. Ding. Obtain the acknowledgement of Hyuga Chiryu. Suddenly, a notification sound woke Uchiha Tunan up. The corners of Uchiha Tunan's mouth curled up slightly. Sure enough, it was a good way to obtain the recognition of emotions with his own charm. Uchiha Tunan turned his head and looked behind him. He saw a little girl in white clothes secretly observing Uchiha Tunan with the cover of the textbook. Suddenly, he saw Uchiha Tunan looking at him like a frightened rabbit. He quickly covered his face with the textbook. He was looking at me, he seemed to be smiling at me. Uchiha Tunan sized up the trembling Hyuga Chiryu and retracted his gaze. Hyuga Chiryu. There was no name of this person in his memory. Either she was a short-lived ghost, or she was married after growing up and no longer a ninja. But then again, most of the people here should die in the Third Ninja World War. Uchiha Tunan remembered the cruelty of the Third Ninja World War in the original story. Konoha was beaten to the door, and as long as it was a genin, they would be dragged to the battlefield as cannon fodder. There are still a few years left. I hope you can learn more ninjutsu before you die, and practice more chakra. Uchiha Tunan thought. At the same time, a white pigeon flew over from the horizon and landed on Uchiha Tunan's desk. Uchiha Tunan reached out and gently stroked the white pigeon's head. The white pigeon rubbed its head with a look of enjoyment. Under the golden sunlight, this scene was very warm. Small animals like to be close to Tunan. He is so warm. I used to think he was as stupid as a beetle. I didn't expect him to be so caring. One by one, the girls gathered together and whispered. Ding. Obtain the recognition of Matsushima. Ding. Obtain the recognition of Uchiha Mainai. Ding. Obtain the approval of Inuzuka Gami. Ding. Gain the approval of Aburame Fong. Uchiha Tunan listened to the system prompt in his mind and glanced at the girls who were whispering among themselves. Perhaps I can be a jerk. If I open a harem and give birth to a bunch of Uchiha brats, his children should naturally agree with him. Then nurture them well, and then pinch them to death one by one. Cough cough, tiger does not eat the child, this is too inhumane. Moreover, time was pressing. Even if it were for the Fourth Great War in the ninja realm, it would only be more than 20 years. He was now 6 years old. In 10 years, he would get married and have children. At that time, his child would still be too young and useless. Uchiha Tunan denied this unrealistic idea in his heart. Then, he gently patted his white pigeon's head. The white pigeon flapped his wings and flew away from the classroom. Did that umbu come to take my diary again? Sarutobi Hiruzen, those who casually peek at other people's privacy will not have a good end. At this moment, Naoto Umino walked in from outside the classroom. One by one, the students rushed back to their seats and sat down. Naoto Umino said with a face full of excitement, "Let me tell you a piece of good news. The local war between Konoha and Hidden Mist Village is over. In order to celebrate peace, the school is ready to give everyone 3 days off." Yay! It's a holiday. we can go out and play now. In addition, the bodies of the deceased heroes have also been transported back from the front line. They are preparing to be buried the day after tomorrow. As Naoto Umino spoke, he shifted his gaze to Uchiha Tunan. At this time, Uchiha Tunan also showed a face of silence at the right time, as if he was secretly sad in his heart. Their names will always be engraved on the tablets for future generations to admire. Konoha will never forget them. Naoto Umino's tone was quite heavy, and then he took a deep breath and forced a smile to the excited students below. Then, school is over now. Come on, let's go play. Wait for me. Kakashi, do you want to burn your youth with me? No. Kakashi simply refused the invitation of Might Guy, then got up and walked out of the classroom. When he passed by Uchiha Tunan's seat, his footsteps slowed down slightly and he said softly, "We still have to practice these few days." Uchiha Tunan looked up at Kakashi with a lonely face. He took a deep breath and then smiled. Of course, father and mother want me to become an excellent ninja. I have to work hard to catch up with your footsteps. The corner of Kakashi's mouth, which was hidden behind the mask, curved slightly. He pretended to walk out lazily and said, "I hope your strength has improved." In Kakashi's eyes, Uchiha Tunan, who had awakened the three Magatama, was not his opponent. Of course, this was because in so many sparring sessions, Uchiha Tunan had always been holding back. Only if he lost to Kakashi every time would he have enough reason to go to Kakashi's house every day. He couldn't just beat Kakashi up every time and lick his face every day. That wouldn't be a sparring session, that was called showing off and bullying. 2 days later. The combat personnel on the front line returned one after another. The first thing they did was bury the dead under the leadership of Sarutobi Hiruzen. In this local war with Hidden Mist Village, Uchiha clan's formation had taken up a third of the total number of dead. The rest were all auxiliary ninjas and a large number of cannon fodder ninjas. The bodies of the dead were covered by white cloth and placed on the lawn. The relatives came to send them off one by one. "Father, don't go. Brother, rest in peace, I will take good care of your wife." There were heartbreaking cries around. Uchiha Tunan tied the white cloth to his head and knelt in front of Uchiha Yambu and Uchiha Hanako's bodies. He was silent. The point of the crying scene was not to cry, but to let others think that you were very sad from the bottom of their hearts. If you cried at the top of your lungs, you would not be able to stand out. The sad atmosphere needed to be laid down plainly, and when necessary, it could be supplemented with a different expression or action. Uchiha Tunan placed the cups he had prepared beforehand in front of Uchiha Yambu and Uchiha Nanako. Then, they poured wine and tea into the cups. The tea was very strong, and the wine was the one that smelled the most fragrant. In an instant, the surroundings were filled with the fragrance of wine and tea, attracting the attention of many people. "Father, I actually always knew that you were that kind of person with a sharp tongue but a soft heart. You have never said a heartwarming word to me, but I know you have done a lot for me." Uchiha Tunan looked at the body of his parents in front of him, with happiness in his eyes, and said in a calm and low voice, "I was very nervous on the day of the entrance examination of the ninja school. You kept calling me a waste with a cold face, telling me not to lose face for you, not to lose face for Uchiha. In fact, I know that you are more nervous than me. Your hands are full of sweat. The sun was so big that day. I took the exam in the classroom. You just stood outside the school and waited. When I told you that I passed the exam, you just said that I was all right. That night, you drank 3 pots of sake. Normally, you only drank 1 glass. You said that the ninja had to stay awake at all times, but you were drunk that day. After school, my grades have been very bad. Every day when you go home, you call me a waste. Then, you teach me how to refine chakra by hand and teach me how to throw kunai. You have worked hard every day, but you still have to stay up late with me. Tell me, ninjas can increase their strength in danger. In order to set an example for a useless son like me, You gave up the stable garrison position and resolutely chose to go to the front line to fight. You said that if my strength is not at the bottom of the line, you will teach me Phoenix Fairy Fire. At this point, Uchiha Tunan's face was filled with a stiff smile. He said in a daze, not only have I awakened the 3 Magatama Sharingan, I have also secretly learned the Phoenix Fairy Fire. I was waiting for you to come back and give you a surprise. I asked you to praise me. Your child is not a waste. At this point, Uchiha Tunan's voice was already hoarse, as if he was trying his best to endure the pain, but he still maintained a smile on his face. 2 lines of clear tears flowed out from the corners of his eyes. He reached out his hand, stood up, and began to form seals. The surrounding people all turned their gazes towards Uchiha Tunan. Uchiha Tunan's hands turned into illusions, quickly forming the last seal. Fire escape, Phoenix Fire Technique. A hoarse shout was heard. Several fire snakes shot out of Uchiha Tunan's mouth and rushed into the sky. Then, they gathered together and collided. The sudden movement completely diverted the attention of the people around them. After the Phoenix Fairy Fire was released, Uchiha Tunan lowered his hands weakly and said with a dazed expression, "In the future, I will never hear you call me trash again. Let me drink with you for the first and last time." After saying that, Uchiha Tunan raised his head and poured the wine in the bottle into his mouth. The tears and spilled wine gathered at his chin and flowed down his neck, soaking most of his shirt. The people who came to mourn were moved, even those who had cried their hearts out before felt as if they weren't that sad when compared to Uchiha Tunan. There is actually such a genius in the clan, and he cherishes his loved ones so much. Originally, the clan should focus on nurturing him, but he was interested in the Hokage. The great elder next to him looked at Uchiha Tunan's performance with his deep eyes and whispered, "Don't be deceived by his appearance. This little guy's tolerance is not ordinary. I think if he can grow up, he will definitely be able to lead the Uchiha clan to the glory of the warring states." When Uchiha Tamatake heard this, he looked at the great elder in surprise. Then he looked at Uchiha Tunan again and carefully sized him up. He said with a puzzled face, "But when I just came back, I heard people in the clan talking about this little guy, saying that he..." The great elder smiled and patted Uchiha Tamatake on the shoulder. "Fuyue, don't care about those things. You will know in the future." Uchiha Tamatake nodded. He still chose to believe the words of the respected great elder. The great elder had always been very accurate at judging people. Uchiha Tunan had not finished his performance. After all, his parents had died, so he could not only pour his feelings for his father. Next was his mother, Uchiha Hanako. "Mother, you are always..." Kakashi and Tsukumo stood not far away, quietly watching Uchiha Tunan. "Kakashi, Tunan is a trustworthy companion. You have to cherish this bond." "Got it." Kakashi pretended to be indifferent as he replied indifferently. However, there was a hint of worry in his eyes as he looked at Uchiha Tunan. Ding, gained Kakashi's approval. Uchiha Tunan, who was telling the truth, suddenly paused. Kakashi had a long life, and his later strength was just average. He was not a good target, but a little weak. Uchiha Tunan secretly shook his head. To him, Kakashi was tasteless. He did not know when he would be able to obtain Tsukumo's approval. Chiryu Hyuga knelt in front of a corpse with a dazed look in her eyes. Because he was too far away from the central area, she did not see Uchiha Tunan. Hyuga Chiryu's father was a detective ninja. At the beginning of this local war, he died on the battlefield. But before today, no one had specifically told her about his father's death. Hyuga Chiryu's father was not talented, he was just a chunin. In this kind of small local war, the Hyuga clan did not send elites to the battlefield. Instead, they pulled a bunch of cannon fodder like his father to be scouts. The powerful family can enjoy themselves in the family, and the weak can only die on the battlefield. Does such a dirty family need to be protected? Hyuga Chiryu lowered her head and murmured. She reached out her right hand into the long bangs on his forehead and gently touched the bird mark in the cage. Her eyes flashed with madness, and there was no longer the tender and weak appearance he had before. The next moment, the veins on Hyuga Chiryu's face bulged. At this time, Hyuga Chiryu rolled her eyes. But because of the sight, no one noticed this scene. After the burial was over, the ninjas who participated in the war and the relatives of the fallen ninjas came to the memorial tablet. Sarutobi, dressed in the royal robe, began to give a comforting speech. The place where Konoha is flying, the fire is endless. Everyone had long been tired of listening to the contents of these speeches, but due to their identity, they could only bow their heads and remain silent. However, as Sarutobi spoke, he changed the topic and a new speech appeared. There are already 3 Hokage in Konoha. The will of fire also changes according to the changes in times. In summary, the core thoughts of the will of fire have never changed, but the key points of each era are different. I summarized the key points of these 3 eras. The focus of the first will of fire is unity. Standing behind the crowd of Uchiha's clan, Uchiha Tunan revealed an excited and reverent expression as he looked at Sarutobi, who was speaking with fervor and assurance on the stage. The contents of his speech were all the contents of Uchiha Tunan's diary. Not to mention plagiarism, he even copied out several key points and actually picked up some minor details. But even so, many people below gradually became absorbed in listening to it.
That is all for today. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this journey, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell. If you have any suggestions or feedback for me, please drop a comment down below.